the Esquimalt and Songhees Nations, on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. Before we get into the approval of the agenda, I'd like to go around the table for introductions, and this evening I'd like to start down on this side, Darcy from BC PAC, and we'll go around for introductions, please.
Darcy Drexel, Vice Chair of BC PAC. My name is Tara Erkey, I'm President of the Greater Victoria Teachers Association.
Deborah, Trustee.
Elaine Leonard, Trustee. Pat Miller, Trustee.
John Gateman, Superintendent of Schools.
Peg Orchton, Trustee and Chair of the Board.
George Apple, Secretary Treasurer.
Judith Ryan, Trustee.
Michael Mack, Trustee.
Kelly, Trustee.
Tom Ferris, Trustee. Brad Hall, General Secretary. John Rose, Chief Reading 2.
Melanie Houston, Allied Specialist Association.
Thank you. And just for those that may be wondering, we have Trustee Nora's husband, Niels, filming our meeting this evening. Just again, a reminder to make sure you get the best sides. We're moving forward now to approval of the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda? Diane or Trustee McNally? You want to move it to where?
F3, so we want to move F3 to right after the chair's report.
Are there any comments, or is there any disagreement or concern about moving that motion to after the chair's report? Trustee McAvoy.
Not really. I just we have a series of motions. I just want to move direction on one of the others. We have right to we have recommended motions from the committee and deal with other notices and motions.
That one was coming forward from another committee, and I guess I'm just anticipating that this is going to be another interesting law meeting, and it would be really good if it was moved forward. It also would affect the rest of the meeting.
Just for clarification, which standing committee did that one come off? It was through operations, was it not? So would it not make sense then to put it with the operations?
I completely agree.
Yeah, I understand, but she's bringing it forward and she has the right to do so. Yes.
It is a procedural motion in accordance with Robert's rules. It should be first on the agenda.
I understand that. I was just thinking that it would go under there, but we can move it there if everybody's willing to do so. It's the will of the board following Robert's Rules of Order. Is there any objection to F3 moving to under the chair's report? Seeing no objections, we'll move motion F3 to after the chair's report. I have change to the agenda, and that is to entertain a motion to suspend our rules under bylaw 9360, which speaks to a maximum of 30 minutes of public speaking and only 3 speakers to any one subject. And obviously this evening we're going to have more than 30 minutes of public speaking and more than 3 speakers to one issue. So I would be willing to entertain a motion to that effect. There's a seconder? Okay. Are there any objections to suspending the rules for this evening on bylaw 9360? Are you speaking to this motion?
No, I have a separate question of the chair.
All right, so before we move on to that, Trustee McNally, I would just like to clarify this. So are there any objections to suspending the rules under bylaw 9360? Seeing none, those that support the motion, please indicate.
Aye.
Any in opposition? Motion is carried and so ordered. Well, Trustee McNally, did you have something else with respect to approval of the agenda?
I'd like to use the in-camera items up to right after the chair's report, right after B. I guess that would be after F3 now. The reason being is in-camera is always last, and in the interest of transparency of the public, I'd like to have the report out earlier, partly because of what we just approved. It's going to be a long meeting.
I think that's going to take a motion to change the agenda because we have a standing agenda order. So we'd be more than happy to entertain that as a motion at a future meeting. But it is practice, and it's also spelled out in our bylaws on how we have the agenda. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I would intend to deal with that at a future date anyway, so let's let it go for now.
Okay, thank you. That would be a notice of bylaw change, just for your information. Trustee McNally? Thank you. Are there any further changes to the approval of the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the January 16, 2012 minutes on pages 5 to 13. Are there any questions? Trustee Lauren Kahunga.
I just wanted to make a change on my trustee's report on page 3. And I do with salary payment of Maryville, interview George Farnell and Meadows School, not payroll.
All right, we may note of that change then, please. Thank you. That will be changed then when we post the minutes on the web. Thank you. Are there any further changes, errors, or omissions on the minutes for January 16, 2012? Is there a motion to accept the minutes, to approve the minutes? Mover, seconder. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move on to business arising. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, I move that we just move on to the next area of the agenda, which would be A4, our student achievement. And I'd like to invite Wendy Holland, a principal, to speak to us about Willows Elementary School, a place of possibilities for 100 years. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, and good evening to fellow trustees. I have the privilege of being the principal at Nicole Willows School. And last year we celebrated our 100th birthday. I'm very pleased to be here tonight with our Vice Principal, Jillian Lawson, and some of our students. Last year, we had a unique opportunity and the unique privilege of celebrating with our students and community 100 years of possibilities. What became very apparent very quickly was the amazing connection people have to this elementary school in Oak Bay. We had the honor of meeting many former students. They were all eager to share their stories of time at Willows School. One lady made her way from Brentwood Bay to Willows School to pick up her wine and cheese ticket. And she said that she was sorry her husband couldn't be there, but they were celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary and he was busy getting her a gift. She told us that she had been a student in grade 7 at the school and that she remembered very clearly needing to practice wearing her gas masks as it was right in the middle of World War II. and she told us of her experiences of taking the younger children home and then coming back to school and being ready to help out in the basement that was to be converted into a hospital for expectant mothers. So we learned an awful lot about our building. The memories and the people who came to tell us about them ranged for pretty much almost 100 years. At one point, I was escorted into room 101, and Mrs. Sloan showed me exactly where she sat in her first grade desk, and her teacher where she stood 86 years ago. I was amazed that someone would have that kind of a memory about their first year at school, but then I remember mine too. The love these people feel for Willows is contagious. And tonight, Jillian will introduce some of our students to share with you a little of their experiences.
Thank you, Andy, and good evening, everyone. We have a few students who are going to share with you, give you a glimpse into the kinds of projects that they did in their classrooms for our 100th birthday. And we'll start with Jack. We're improvising.
My name is Jack Kushner. I am in Mr. Massini's grade 4 class. Last year, Willows had its 100th birthday, and each grade had a decade to study. Mine was the 60s. We each chose a subject to study about. My project was the 1960s movies. I studied and found movies from comedy to romance. I think movies today have better graphics and better color than the 60s. One day I would like to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was a fun project. We got all our ideas and put them into a poster. I learned more about the 60s looking at other people's posters than on the internet. It was a great experience. It is very cool being in a school that is 100 years old because so many students have gone through the school and were taught in the same classrooms that we are now in. I like older buildings, and I think our multiple-story school built of red brick with a tin roof is very beautiful. The last 100 years have been good ones for Willows, but I think the next 100 years will be even better. Thank you.
Good job, Jack. I hope you get to see that film. It's a great one. And now we'll have Laura.
Hi, my name is Alora Sargentson, and I am in grade 4 this year. It's really cool going to school that's 100 years old. Last year, all the divisions were divided up into groups of 2, classes in each group. They got together and studied a different decade between 1910 and 2000. The class I was in did the 60s, the decade that brought us the Beatles, the Flintstones, and Happy Stole Christmas. So there's more to this decade than you think. It's special. It's the decade of revolution. It is when Martin Luther King gave his speech, I Have a Dream. When I heard the speech, I thought it was moving, because when he says, I have a dream, that one day my 4 little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, which conjure up a character. I felt, yeah! To me, this means that people should be judged by their personality, what they are like, and what they do, and not by the color of skin, or where they are from. At Willows, we are creative at caring about everybody equally. It has nothing to do with where they are from. Each student got to pick what they wanted to find out about in the 60s. I did my project on the dolls of the 60s. My favorite thing is the dolls' unique shapes, sizes, and colors. There's Chatty Cathy's, of course, Barbie, and the Troll dolls. But I like the Beatles dolls best because they are so unique and really hard to find. I found them when I was doing my research on the internet. I did not know there were so many different types of dolls. My school is special too. It started off as a tiny house just down the street from where we are now, on the corner of Estevan and Musgrave. It celebrated its 100th birthday last year, and it is amazing to be in a school that has such a big heritage. With our upgrade, we are ready for another 100 years. So far, that has been my favorite year. They have a great musical and
The chair.
Hi, my name is Megan. This is my 6th year at Willows Elementary. Last year, we celebrated 100 years of this school, and every class did a project on a decade. My class did the 1940s. We each had to do a diorama on a subject like toys, clothes, room styles, etc. I was put to the test in toys. I did paper dolls for my project, and that went over smoothly. School is kind of the same as back then. We all still learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. We get gym and library, but school is not just writing on paper. Nowadays, we get stuff like field trips, fun day, Terry Fox run, smart boards, being with friends, monitoring, the list just grows and grows. Last year, we did the yearly musical play on kids traveling 100 years back in time and slowly moving up through the decades. It really showed what was different about back then. I was honored to be at Willows for the 100th birthday, and I hope that in 200, 500, and 1,000 years from now, Willows will still be around for many kids to learn and have the wonderful experience that I have had. This school is amazing, and I love it.
Thank you, Megan, and I do admire somebody that can look ahead 1,000 years. Now, we often talk at Willows about being members of the Willows family, and this evening we have with us someone who was at Willows last year but has now moved on to grade 6. But really, une fois membre de la famille de Willows, toujours membre de la famille de Willows. And I'd like you to meet Catherine Strom-Trudell. Catherine is a budding poet, and when she showed us this poem last year, we knew that it was something that captured the spirit of Willow's 100th birthday, and we're happy to be able to present it to you tonight. Catherine?
Bonjour, je m'appelle Catherine et je suis allée à Willows depuis maternelle jusqu'au 5e année. I was a student at Willows from kindergarten to grade 5. J'avais écrit ce poème parce que j'adore mon école et c'était parce que je voulais le représenter ça. I wrote this poem because I loved my school and it was my last year there and I wanted to represent that. If you are going to spend 6 years of your life at elementary school, Willows should be that place. To me, Willows is like a second home, where we have teas for Queen Victoria and put on fantastically crazy musicals about the Ritz, Mozart, and a time travel clock, where the teachers teach you to read and write, spell, and sing. A place where the sun always shines and the fields are always green, with 100-year-old oak trees and colorfully painted sand. At Willows, we celebrate. We celebrate people, we celebrate achievement, we celebrate the world, we celebrate books, music, sports, and friendship. Celebrate doesn't even describe it. That's how passionate we are. Willows is the old and the new, the bricks and the cement, the gym and the library. We were in and out and in again. We are not afraid of change, or really anything, because we are Willows. We are the French and the English, and many, many other languages. At school, you meet your friends, and some may say enemies, but at Willows, we are all friends. And if you go home and say, I had a horrible day, well, you'd be wrong, because at Willows, every day is a good one.
copy of that poem right near my desk, and I look at it frequently. So now we've come to the last student on our program, and that is Cheyenne Freeman, and Cheyenne has a special presentation to make.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Cheyenne Freeman. Je suis en 5e année à l'école Willows. De la part de mon école, j'ai l'honneur de présenter au conseil scolaire cette aquarelle de l'école. This watercolor was painted by Leslie Redhead, mother of a former student of Willows School, Blake Redhead. Ms. Redhead is an award-winning artist and teacher. She generously donated the original copy to our school where it hangs in a main hallway. In celebration of Willow's 100th birthday, I am pleased to present this copy to School District 61.
Thank you on behalf of the board. Thank you very much. It's gorgeous.
We'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to come and share a little bit of the fun that we had last year. We hope that our gift to you will bring a smile to your face as you, along with us, dream of the possibilities for the next 100 years. Thank you very much.
Wendy, Lillian, Jack, Alora, Megan, Catherine, and Cheyenne. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you very much for the lovely gift. And also, seeing as it's a school night, you are quite able to leave if you wish and to make your way home so you can get a good night's sleep in order that you can continue to do the good work at school that you're obviously doing. But thank you very much for your presentations. They were very well done. Okay, we're now moving on to A6 community presentations. And because we have a large number of speakers, and I'm just wondering for number 4 and 5, do we have names attached? Can somebody bring those names up to me, maybe Jason? I'd like to be able to introduce them appropriately, or Benula. So who's 4? Nicole Strong. Okay. The teachers are just handing out some information. Because we have so many speakers, we are going to be very strict on the 5-minute time limit. The Secretary-Treasurer does have an alarm on his iPad, and he will give you a 30-second warning so that you can wrap your comments up, if that's all right. So Tara, I welcome you to the podium, please. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd just like to start. I noticed the title of presentation that's coming after me, and I just want to start by saying, we're going to have some differences of opinion, and we're going to have some debate and discussion, but ensuring success of all our students is our same goal. And I just want to start by saying that we are here to find our way to a place to do what's right for everybody, but we are going to have some debate along the way. I'm here to respond to the letter that was jointly co-authored by the board and BCPAC calling on the government to repeal the sections of the School Act that require consultation with a teacher whenever a class is organized with more than 3 students with special needs. For those who are familiar, it was introduced in the legislature as Bill 33, and I'll refer to it that way. There's a long history, and I just would like to go over it briefly. Teachers in 1991 in Victoria went on strike over class composition and class size. That was the beginning of this road for teachers. We were successful, and the board agreed and signed an agreement with us that included limits for class size and limits with respect to how classes were organized. That language was in place for 10 years. In 1998, in provincial bargaining, it was strengthened through a provincial agreement that set class sizes in K to 3, and teachers gave up salary in order to pay for that. We took 0 and 0 those 2 years in order to pay for the cost of extra teachers to meet those class size limits. In 2002, a dark day, a decade ago, the current Liberal government unilaterally on the weekend enacted what is called Bill 28 and removed those clauses from our collective agreement, removed all limits on class size and on class composition, and removed our right to even bargain those items. By the time 2005 rolled around, the quote-unquote flexibility in the system meant that a school where I was teaching, every single PE 9 class had 40 students in it or more. It took only 3 years for flexibility to mean an increase of 30 to 40% in the class size of many classes. Teachers, outraged at what had happened in 2005, walked off the job for 2 weeks. And in response, Bill 33 was enacted in 2006. Bill 33 is not what we wanted. We wanted our contract language back, and we wanted the right to negotiate, but Bill 33 is what came, and it was better than nothing. Bill 33 does provide some limits in K to 7 for class size, and it provides guideline limits, I'll call them, for class composition. When those limits are exceeded, the teacher has the right to a meeting with the principal to discuss the class, what it looks like, and there's reporting so that parents, teachers, and the public know how many classes are overcrowded. We know now that there are 12,000 overcrowded classes in British Columbia. 2011, the Supreme Court of British Columbia ruled that Bill 28 was unconstitutional and gave the government 1 year to rectify the legislation. Now, the letter that was written calls on the government to remove any class composition limits from Bill 33. What does Bill 33 do? Bill 33 does differentiate. I'm not going to say or pretend it doesn't. It does. So do IEPs. So does the entire system of designation. It does identify students. It labels them. And it does that for the purpose of providing targeted and additional funding and ensuring that classes are organized and schools are organized in ways that can ensure the success of all students. Bill 33 is not broken. All too many times the limits are exceeded. As I mentioned, we've had 12,000 overcrowded classes in BC today. But to remove what we have would be a step backwards. Without Bill 33, students would be clustered, and we've seen this happen. If you have only one EA, the rationale that is most often provided by the principal for putting most of the students with special needs into one classroom is because that's where the educational assistant is, and that's where they would have some support. You know, it's the same argument that was used for segregation.
30 seconds.
Are there problems with Bill 33? Yes. Is the solution to remove it an emphatic no? Simply removing the limits will take us backwards, not forwards. We will have more clustering, more segregation, less teacher time, less success for all students. We ask you to reconsider your position. The government clearly, responded to what you did, and we ask you to consult fully with all partner groups on this issue. Removal of the limits without any guarantees for minimal service levels for students will only worsen the situation that we have today. Thank you.
To make her remarks now. Starla.
Is there a clock that we can actually watch ourselves?
Right there.
Okay, so I'm right now at 8:07. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to express my concerns for the children in the school district, those who have been identified as special needs and their classmates. Specifically, I will address the request of school board trustees and the president of the BC PAC, Mr. John Bird, that Education Minister George Abbott rescind legislation limiting the number of special needs students in the classroom. I'm speaking from my own experience as a parent, teacher, and consultant, and this appeal has been endorsed by former school board chair Carol Pickup. First, let's think about the children who are at the heart of this controversial request of Mr. Minister Abbott. Special needs students are children who've been identified by professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, speech and hearing consultants, medical doctors, counselors, and teachers as needing adapted curriculum and personalized methods of instruction to be successful learners in our schools. Most, but not all, require one-on-one time with an education aid. I know these students well because I taught them for over 30 years. In mainstream classrooms and skills centers, in programs that I personally designed for the Vancouver School District. I also understand their needs from having spent 6 years researching effective methods of instruction for language-delayed students to earn my doctorate in language and literacy education. In your letter to Minister Abbott, you cite discrimination as your key concern about limiting the numbers of special needs students in the mainstream classroom. You don't define discrimination, but one might assume that you're concerned with negative connotations of this term. That is, with differential treatment based on bias or prejudice. This term also has a neutral definition, however. The recognition and understanding of the difference between one thing and another. It is in fact through discrimination that all professionals are able to discern the strengths and challenges of every child in the school system. And it is the knowledge that comes from such discrimination that helps teachers to be successful in motivating and supporting individual students' learning. Educators in industrial countries have fought for the principle of equity since the 1960s. Equity meaning that diverse programs and diverse instructional approaches are needed for children, whether because they have special needs or because children have different gifts and intelligences or different cultural background. The esteemed philosopher R.S. Peters argued that equity in education does not mean that children should all be taught the same curriculum using the same methods of instruction. And it is by limiting the numbers of special needs students that all individual students' strengths and challenges can be addressed in a classroom. In BC, teachers walked picket lines in the 1990s to get equity for special needs students. We did so even though it meant reduced income and pension benefits. We were on side with parents who wanted their special needs children to be integrated wherever their learning could be enhanced by the integration. But we recognized that there needed to be limits placed on the numbers of special needs children to be integrated in any one classroom for the sake of these children as well as the others in their classes. We also needed assurance that there would be education aids for those children who needed one-on-one assistance. When these changes were implemented, they were applauded by parents and teachers alike. And then, in 2002, the newly elected Liberal government broke this contract and put the system in disarray. After 9 years of waiting for a hearing on this broken contract, the Supreme Court of British Columbia ruled that teachers do have the right to bargain for class size and composition quotas, and the ministry was given 1 year until May 2012 to redress the teachers' grievance. At the time of the ruling, Minister Abbott said to the press, "Our priority now is meeting the needs of individual students as we move towards personalized learning while ensuring appropriate learning conditions in our schools and proper support for BC's teachers." Though teachers have yet to receive much encouragement in this regard in their negotiations, May 2012 is not far away. Within this broad context, I will now focus on the situation in School District 61 vis-a-vis the education of students with special needs. During the past 6 years, I've campaigned twice for a seat on this board, and consequently, I paid a lot of attention. Here are my suggestions. First of all, my understanding for minutes from the fall is that you have $835,000 surplus, and you have the authority to reallocate this surplus. What's needed right now is education aids in this district. Secondly, this morning on the CBC, Education Minister Abbott said that we're all adults, we can sit around the table and solve this problem. My second suggestion is that you ask to have that meeting with the minister, bring in other stakeholders, and personally, I'll volunteer to be in that delegation pro bono. Pro bono.
Thank you, Starla. If you have copies of that you'd like to share with your suggestions, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
My name is Mitch Barnes. I've been a teacher in this district. I am a little taller. I've been a teacher in this district for 25 years, and in that time I've worked with some wonderful students, parents, and staff. I've been tremendously fortunate to win the Prime Minister's Award twice, the Canadian Teachers Federation Award for Outstanding Teacher in Canada, and the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal for contributions to education in Canada. And last week, I got Alex in my class to fill out his homework book for the whole week. I am not here to talk about the incredibly negative impact it has for teachers and students when these class size numbers are exceeded. I'm here to talk, as you can see, with no script, on a very personal story. Something that perhaps you hadn't heard before. Maybe give you some further information to consider. You see, in that 25 years, one of the things I wound up doing a few years ago is I was appointed as an acting administrator. As an administrator, in my administrative role, the contract language was always in the back of my mind. When, and it seems inevitable these days, a class in my school had to be exceeding those numbers of designated children in the class, the contract provided an opportunity. You see, what it did is, as an administrator, it gave me cause to pause, to think, to collect my thoughts, and to really establish in my own mind what were the educational reasons for creating a class that exceeded those numbers. I knew that conversations would have to be had with the teaching colleague, and I wanted to make sure that I really thought it out. The language in the contract is a boon for administrators, for teachers, and especially for all kids. Some have described the language in the contract as being discriminatory. That baffles me. I mean, is extra teaching assistant time for a learning disabled child discriminatory? Is it a free field speaker system for a hearing impaired child discriminatory? Is a visual guide for a visually impaired child discriminatory? Oh, no. No, they're not. And neither is the language in this contract. One of the things I've been doing recently is I teach logic to gifted children, another special needs group. And as part of our look at logic, we look at logic in current events. And one child last week bought the story about the letter that went out to the minister. And he said, Mr. Barnes, it's not logical. And he laughed. He said, they're saying here that this will actually, by removing the language, it will help special needs children. He said, Mr. Barnes, that's sort of like trying to do away with high-speed accidents by getting rid of the speed limit. I think you could perhaps frame it a bit more diplomatically, but his logic was flawless. I would urge this board and Parents Group to please reconsider the information in that letter and hopefully to consider things logically. Thank you.
Members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Nicole Strong. I'm a grade 2 teacher in SD61. I'm a parent of a child with autism in our school district in grade 1, and I'm the head of an advocacy group for children with autism. I came to speak to the issue of class composition. I am in favor of supported inclusion, and in order to have supported inclusion, that means 3 IEPs per classroom in my view. I know firsthand the energy it takes to get my child to eat and put on his socks and to not have a major meltdown on the way out the door, and that's in the controlled environment of my home. So every day I send my child to school hoping and praying and actually knowing what an amazing job his teacher is doing to have him be a part of a group, to function in a group. And it takes an amazing amount of her energy to do so. Emails, phone calls, meetings that aren't scheduled, meetings with her EA which she does not get release time for. Amazing amounts of energy. I'd estimate an hour or 2 just for my son for the week. And her classroom is 20 kids and there's only 2 designated children. She's able to do that. If the language is removed, I can't see how it would be humanly possible for her to do that for all of those children, let alone the neurotypical children in the classroom. By keeping the current formula, ministries and the board are held accountable to check in, to report on, and support children with special needs with the proper specialists. If you take away the formula, you take away accountability, and you take away the public's and my, as a parent, my right to know how my child is doing in our school system. If nurses are saying that a 1-to-4 ratio best meets the health and safety needs of their patients, very few of us would question that. If teachers are saying 3 children with special needs is the maximum that we can handle in order to meet not only their safety needs, but their social, emotional, and academic needs, I would wonder why our professional judgment would be being questioned at all, actually. Specifically to the VC-PAC, as a parent and a teacher in the district, like I said, with a child with special needs, it's very interesting to me because I'm a part of a group of over 200 parents who I actively meet with or email with or chat with. And none of us have been surveyed or polled or have been contacted by the VC-PAC to get our views on the current campaign that's been happening to take the language out of Bill 33 that supports our kids. This is doing a huge disservice to our children. Many of these families cannot get out to PAC meetings. They cannot get out to VC-PAC meetings, and their voices are not being heard. And I don't think it's right for a campaign to be put forth and words to be put in the mouths of people who haven't even had a chance to speak to the issue. And I know that the families that I'm in contact with are in support of teachers having a language that keeps their children safe and their needs met in the classroom. So I would encourage you to reach out to those parents, reconsider your position, survey, poll, demand research from the ministry that gets current VC research out there so that we can see more numbers and have a really logical conversation that is supported by research and reported by parents and reported for all the kids that are in our school system. Thank you.
My name is Christy Kilpatrick. I'm a grade 6 that I'm not easily influenced by party lines, whether it's my own union or my employer or anybody else. I am a trained professional that has stayed current with professional development. I love my work, and what I and all of my colleagues are driven by passionately is my students and their education and their well-being. You have heard and are hearing many stories about what it's like in our classrooms. My colleagues have been eloquent. But I am compelled to add my voice because it has been a long time since I have felt so disheartened. Despite our stories, it doesn't feel as though the voices of those who are living day to day, what most of you can only talk or read about, are being heard. I am one of those classrooms that have over the limit of designated students. My colleagues that are here tonight all have over the limit. I have 5. I also have 8 ESL students. I have a gifted student. He is ADHD. Are these labels? Yes. And most of us don't like using labels. But are they necessary? Yes. They help us identify the needs of each individual student. Bill 33 does not discriminate. It helps us protect our students. When you take away the class composition limits and the opportunities for our voices to be heard, you take away student rights to a supportive learning environment and a high-quality education. I've been reflecting today, and I said to my colleague on the way over here, it's kind of like gaining weight. Over a year, you eat a little bit, and you eat a little bit more, and you maybe gain a pound, and then gain another pound. And whoops, 10 years later, you've gained 10 pounds. Over the last 10 years, I've been doing the best work that I know how to do. I've loved coming to my job every day. But when this happened, when I heard about this letter, the last 10 years came into focus for me, and I realized just how much our education system has been eroded. I urge you not only to rescind your letter to the government, but to listen to the professional, experienced voices who spend each day with your children. We know what we're talking about. Thank you.
School District 61, and I'm here because I am dismayed that the position, VCPAC's position, is being presented as the position of the parents in the district. I don't think it's a well-hidden secret that the organisation of VCPAC is quite dysfunctional, and as such, it's poorly represented by PACs in the district. And within the poor representation, generally members have more than one vote, or people attending have more than one vote. So what we've seen there is controversial topics being passed as VCPAC policy when they in no way represent the opinions of the population at large, the parents. The one thing I can draw to your attention is that there are 5 parents listed here to speak. I'm the only one who's not a VCPAC executive member. So what we have is 4 executive members from VCPAC standing up to defend this controversial subject as if they were regular run-of-the-mill parents, which they're not. I have one child with an IEP and I have one child without an IEP. And I think that restricting the number of children with an IEP in one classroom in order that the teacher can provide sufficient resources to both of my children is important. It's important to me as the parent of a child without an IEP, and it's important to me as the parent of a child with an IEP. Perhaps in an ideal world where there was abundant funding, endless, bottomless funding, you could have 5 autistic children in one classroom, and it would work. We don't have that funding. The reality of the situation is that special education funding in this province is atrociously lacking. What we have now doesn't work. I don't suggest that we throw out what doesn't work in order to replace it with something that is going to work even less because there's no more money. What it means then is that you can just put as many IEP children in one classroom as you want without any consultation. My child has an IEP, and I don't consider that to be discrimination, if anybody knows, because there's no shame attached to it for her, and there's no shame attached to it for me. It's a statement of fact. She doesn't learn like other children learn. That's the way that she is. So if somebody wants to call that out, that's fine. It's not a problem. That's who she is. It's who she's always going to be. She processes information differently. If I try to hide that, or if I say that if somebody mentions it that it's discriminatory, then I'm teaching her shame. I'm teaching her there's something wrong with being who she is, and there's not. I want a system where she can get the support that she wants, that there is funding for the support that she wants, and that we don't have to worry about overcrowding in classrooms, that we don't have to worry about a teacher being spread too thin to deal with, usually it's the average kids in the class, the ones who are sort of doing okay and ticking over. Those are the kids that lose out. It's generally not the kids at either end of the scale. So, to some, I'd like to say, I don't just speak on my behalf, I speak on behalf of the executives of the Margaret Jenkins PAC, of whom I'm the chair. So that right there is a group of parents who do not agree, who strongly disagree with the position taken by VC PAC. It is not representative of the majority of parents, and should you wish to move forward with such a controversial proposition, I ask you to poll the parents in the district and find out what they really think, rather than taking the opinion of a very small minority of children, very small minority of parents who have a very specific agenda that's not well hidden. Thank you.
Wendy, if I could have you come to the podium, please.
And before I start, can I just clarify? John had 5 minutes for his presentation, and he's given me his notes for his presentation, as well as I have my own. Do I now only have 5 between the two, or do I have 5 minutes for his presentation and then I can do my own?
I'll put this to the board for their, I believe that you have a PowerPoint presentation between the
yes,
group.
All 4 presentations are on the same PowerPoint.
And this is unusual for John to miss anything, so how does the board feel about just extending that courtesy as we've extended, we've changed the rules anyway for tonight? Is there anybody that's against that? All right, fine. Go ahead, Wendy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm starting off by doing John Bird's presentation for him. So I'm just going to be reading from notes. It won't be very polished, but I'm going to try to cover what he wanted to talk about. And what he wanted to talk about was the nature of discrimination. And so just to start off, what is discrimination? And I know that's already come up this evening about what people are asking about what that might be or not be. And we're talking about discrimination as being the prejudicial treatment of an individual based on their membership in a certain group or category. It involves the actual behaviors towards groups, such as excluding or restricting members of these groups from opportunities that are available to everyone else. In other words, the group suffering from discrimination is treated as inferior and eventually believes that they are. Some of you may be familiar with a study that happened quite a long time ago, and I know one of our young speakers this evening brought up Dr. Martin Luther King. In 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And at that time, in response to the assassination over 30 years ago, a teacher named Jane Elliott devised the controversial and startling Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes exercise. This now famous exercise labels participants as inferior or superior based and exposes them to the experience of being a minority. On the evening of April 4th, she turned on her television to find out about the assassination. And the following day, she had a class discussion about it and about racism in general. But she states, and I could see that they weren't internalizing a thing. They were doing what white people do. When white people sit down to discuss racism, what they're experiencing is shared ignorance. On that day, she designated the blue-eyed children as a superior group. She provided the brown fabric collars and asked the blue-eyed students to wrap them around the necks of their brown-eyed peers as a method of easily identifying the minority group. She gave the blue-eyed children extra privileges such as second helpings at lunch, access to the new jungle gym, and 5 extra minutes at recess. As she observed the students in reaction to the discrimination exercise, it showed immediate changes in their personalities and interaction with each other as early as the first 15 minutes. Those who were deemed superior became arrogant, bossy, and otherwise unpleasant to their inferior classmates. The grades also improved, doing mathematical and reading tasks that seemed outside their ability before. The inferior classmates also transformed into timid and subservient children, including those who had previously been dominant in the class. These children's academic performance suffered even with tasks that had been simple before. The following day, she reversed the exercise, making the brown-eyed children superior. While the brown-eyed children did taunt the blue-eyes in the way similar to what had occurred the previous day, she reported that it was much less intense. She then told the blue-eyed children to take off their collars, and the children cried and hugged one another. The education results of this were that students performed to the expectations that are given to them. Now, you probably will have a hard time reading this, but these are a number of beliefs about that are driving discrimination. And these are some examples. Chinese immigrants paying head taxes in 1885. At that time, BC politicians were concerned by the rapid growth of the Chinese population in comparison to the rest of the population in the province. And they were also afraid of losing the support of the working class who feared competition from this labor. Women getting the vote in 1917, women were seen as intellectually incapable to vote, too emotional and impulsive to make rational decisions. There was a general belief that politics would be too much for the delicate female temperament. In 1920, of course, we had Jewish students in Canada, where many universities, like McGill, set quotas on the number of Jewish students who were permitted to enroll in those schools. They felt the presence of many Jews tended to lower the tone of Canadian universities. Japanese Canadians being put into camps in 1941. Over a 9-month period, 22,000 people were taken from their homes and scattered throughout BC. The scared people of BC cried out, wanting the BC government to deal with the problem as they saw it, which were the Japanese Canadians. And then in 2006, we talked about the limits on students with special needs. Students with special needs could now be moved from one class to another or another school by deeming the classroom inappropriate for learning. There was no requirement to ensure that adequate resources provided, simply that we move them around.
30 seconds.
Above all, these decisions are based on fear and mistrust. All have been stopped except the last one. Why do we let it happen? You can see the quote here by Carl T. Rowan. When we have our focus on something else like funding, we may not actually appreciate the damage being done. And of course, we know what the effects are. Lack of success, lack of belief in one's abilities, bullying, social disconnection, anger, frustration, the list goes on. These are long-term effects that change lives forever. How do we recognize discrimination? It's in what we say every day. And these are quotes that we've seen recently on blogs and in newspapers. Adding the special needs student to the mix makes everyone all feel cozy feeling, takes away from the rights of the students that actually have a real need, the need of an education. My children are already stuck in classes with 3 or more. You can see the list goes on here. All of these statements reinforce the concept that students with special needs are inferior. And then you can see at the end there's some quotes that speak for themselves. The important one, though, is the last one. It may be necessary temporarily to accept a lesser evil, but one must never label a necessary evil as good.
Wendy, you need to turn into yourself.
I'm going to turn into myself.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So, Bill 33. We've heard lots of discussion about it. We've all had those discussions ourselves. I'm sure everyone in this room has talked to others about Bill 33. We've all heard what people have had to say, and we've heard lots of public discussion about it. What we'd like to do is talk about some of the myths and the facts about Bill 33. The first one is that Bill 33 is needed to ensure appropriate funding for children with special needs and individual education plans. The fact is, Bill 33 has never resulted in funding of any kind. Funding for designated children occurs outside of Bill 33, based on designated categories in the ministry's funding formula. IEPs themselves do not result from Bill 33, but are required due to a ministerial order. Myth number 2, special needs designations ensure that a child so designated will receive the services that are required. The fact is, designation does not ensure an appropriate level of service. In some cases, it does provide additional revenue to the district, but there is certainly no guarantee that a child's needs will be actually met based on having a designation. Myth number 3, Bill 33 puts a cap on the number of students with special needs in a classroom. Fact is, when the class has been allocated more than 3 students with special needs, a consultation process is triggered that requires the principal and the superintendent to ensure that the class is appropriate for student learning. There is no cap. There is no guarantee. It is simply consultation. Number 4, it is more difficult to teach a class that has 4 IEPs than 3. It is easier to teach a class that has 2 IEPs than 3. I think this is one that I probably heard the most discussion about talking to different parents and different teachers. And that is that due to the great diversity in the children that receive IEPs, there's no way to measure the challenges without considering each student individually. I'm sure everyone would agree that no child with an IEP is identical to another. Each is an individual with their own unique needs. Therefore, 3 is not a magic number. And myth number 5. Removing the limit of 3 IEPs per classroom increases the number of IEPs per the number of 3 IEPs will increase the number of IEPs per classroom. The percentage of students with IEPs has been stable actually over the last 10 years, before and after Bill 33 was brought in. Classroom averages have also been stable since measurement began in 2005. And if you look at the chart on this page, you may not be able to see it that closely, but you'll notice that IEPs across the years from 2001 to 10 have been on average about 10% of the population. And really, this is where we start talking about what we think is the trust in the system, is that we need to, with the same number of IEPs, and what we're looking at here is the class sizes, they also haven't changed. It's about how kids are how many kids are, it's about how many kids are in the classroom, not what types of kids are in our classroom. If the workload is too great, based on a regular mix of kids, then we should be negotiating class size, not the components within the class. We want classrooms to reflect the mix in our community, and the only way we can do that is by ensuring that classes are not judged based on their components. We can simply look at the size of the classrooms if we think it's not a manageable workload. I'm going to pass it on now to Darcy to continue talking through the next section on reframing the issue.
Thank you, Wendy/John, and welcome, Darcy Dragset.
Okay, we're here, reframing the issue. It's not about the designated students. Students are on a continuum. All students have unique learning styles, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. All students have a variety of abilities, learning skills, and acquired knowledge that they come to each class with. The concept of designated students is artificial. The fact that we think that there's this maximum magic number, this gray area, the kids that are C- or below, they have a learning disability, those were things that were artificially put into place. Some things have specific needs, but there are others that have become artificial. We must build on the confidence, abilities, and interests of each student. Our education system. The education system was designed to teach to a range of children that it perceives to be typical. Children perceived to be non-typical or supported to fit in. We create groups to identify those that don't fit in as well, such as English as a second language, Aboriginal, and special needs. We provide special funding to help them fit in. The schools that we need should be designed to serve the students that arrive. Resource requirements analyzed by student, by each individual student, rather than by groups of students. Deployment of resources based on preserving each student's sense of belonging in the school community. Deployment of resources that augments each student's inherent desire to learn, not just those that have received IEPs. And now I'm calling Darcy Lindley.
Thank you, Darcy B. Welcome, Darcy W.
Thank you. The road ahead, determining, allocating, and advocating for resources. How do we determine which resources are required? Well, first we need to identify the learning styles for all students. Teachers do this. This is current best practice. We create learning environments that sustain and augment our children's natural desire to learn. We need to determine what resources we need to create the learning environment that suits them, that environment that will engage each and every child to learn. Well-determined resources will create a successful learning environment in school and its classrooms for all students, not just those who meet a specific set of criteria that trigger designation and an IEP. Every single student, there are far too many students who don't have a designation but who struggle and who need support. The role of the school community. We need to work in partnership, the entire school community, to ensure resources are allocated equitably, not necessarily equally. Work in meaningful partnership. We need to collaborate. We need to advocate for resources required to serve all students. It's a vision of the entire school community working together in advocacy. Members of the school community must assume an active role and take responsibility for the success of every single student in their school. Advocating for resources. The school community must ensure that it has a clear understanding of its resource requirements. We are talking about establishing a school-based group to allocate resources, because every school is as individual as the students that are within them, and to identify which resources are required that are not currently being provided. We need to share the innovations with other schools to assist in creating appropriate funding models and levels. And finally, we need to tirelessly advocate for the resources that are required. And we believe presently that the level of resources are inadequate, absolutely inadequate, not just for students with IEPs, but for many more besides. And we have been advocating for resources. We will continue to advocate for resources. That's good. The key purpose in BC PAC's Constitution is to advocate for the rights of and support the success of every student. BC PAC believes that this goal has not yet been met by our educational system. We are determined to advocate for the resources required to ensure the success of all students.
To the board for having us come here and letting us speak on behalf of John, who wasn't able to make it here tonight, and we appreciate this time tonight. And we also appreciate what you said, Deborah, at the beginning, that we do have a common goal and that we have heard many pieces of that and what the teachers have said here tonight. And we are working towards the same goal, perhaps in slightly different ways, but I'm hoping we're going to get there. So thank you.
I would also inform the fellow board members and also members of the audience that as president of the British Columbia School Trustees Association, myself and our vice president, Teresa Zansoff, met with our management's loyal opposition leader this afternoon, along with the education critic for the NDP, to talk about education in the province. It was a very good discussion. It was a very frank discussion about issues facing us. I regret to say, for those who are in the room and listening, he did not promise bucket loads of money in the event that the opposition is elected to government, but he certainly indicated an indication to want to resolve and work on various challenges that we face in the public education system today.
Thank you, Trustee McAvoy. Trustee Loring Kahunga, please.
I actually, before my trustee's report, can I have a point of clarification and your questions in regards to all the presentations that happened? Yes. So first of all, because I wasn't here for the ops and the education meeting, I just want a point of clarification because according to some of the discussion in the letters that went out, I just wonder how many students with special needs in our school district have been turned away from their neighborhood school because
report it back to the trustee.
I can report back, but I can also say, as superintendent, that I've never heard of a student with special needs being turned away from the schools of their choice, as long as it's in their capital area.
Great, thank you. And second of all, I'd like to know whether I had asked John from BPAC if he had done a financial analysis to take a look at our current funding formula and the way that we get funding, and to do comparative financial analysis to see whether or not we would actually get more money based on the formula and based on what he is proposing. And I wonder if that has been done.
I think I can answer that. The Budget Advisory Committee is working on that, and you may hear some interesting news when I give my chair report.
Thank you. Because I find it very difficult to accept something that's new if we haven't really taken a look at a financial analysis to see if we're going to be better off or not, and be careful what we think, what we wish for, because we know that the current government certainly isn't handing down, as Trustee McAvoy said, buckets of money for education. So in regards to my report, I just wanted to say a couple of things about some of the schools that I've been to. As you know, first of all, I want to thank everybody for providing so much support to me over the last couple of weeks. And as I sit here, I know that I should be walking softly as I'm still breathing, but it's very difficult when I know that there's so many issues that are coming forward. I have, in the last couple of weeks, had attended Mount Doug Secondary. I also went to Tilton School, also attended the TAC bingo at Eagleview, and had an opportunity to watch TAC really working hard at fundraising. Other activities that I've attended are the All Nations Education Council. As a liaison for the board, it was my first meeting, and much of the meeting was focused on rewriting enhancement agreement goals for the renewal. The VPAC meeting, I attended my first VPAC meeting. I also went to the Elder George Thomas's memorial service. One of our elders in the Esquimalt Nation who passed away. I went and paid my last respects to the family. And one that I thought was very interesting was Janice's place. As many of you know, Janice Edroff was a student in our school district at one time, and has now just opened up Janice's place. So on the 22nd of January, I went and attended the open house, and it was amazing to see how many of our students have displayed artwork throughout that entire place. Amazing, amazing art. And I really encourage all of our trustees to take a look at that place, because the artwork is just amazing from so many of our students that are throughout all of the rooms and the hallways and all of the sitting areas. So I really encourage everybody to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee. I'd like to now call on Trustee Norm.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, can I just hold on for a second? I just want to make mention, I've noticed in the last few meetings that there's been passing of notes from members of the audience to members at the table. And this is a public meeting, and I'd like that to stop, please. And thank you. Trustee Nora, will you continue?
Thank you. I have a letter here from some parents who were unable to attend tonight, and I would like to just read one paragraph, if I may, from their letter. So this is Bobby and John Berry, and they have 4 sons who have attended Rock Heights, and when I spoke to them about the issue of supporting the classroom and the letter that was sent forward by our trustees, they were concerned enough to write a letter, but unfortunately not able to come tonight. But in the final paragraph, they say this: on a personal note, we have a son who has been identified with moderate behavior / mental illness learning disability. We are grateful that his particular learning difficulty facilitate his learning. However, there are other students with higher needs at his school and in his classroom, and therefore, despite the best efforts of school staff, he is not receiving all the help he requires. It has been a consistent struggle to ensure that he gets the support he is currently getting. Please do not remove the limits on the number of special education students in the classrooms. I'd also like to mention that it's been very, very interesting to attend PAC meetings. I find that at the school-based PAC, there are many, many parents who are genuinely interested in trying to understand the complexity of the school district and the school system and the ministry. And when we attended at Willow's, Trustee McAvoy was able to give a very detailed explanation of the new high school, Oak Bay High, and they had many really good questions around that. But they also asked about funding. So parents they're starting, there is an awakening in our parents because they are seeing for themselves in the schools the impact of lack of funding. And so they asked some questions around how do we get funding for EAs? What is the funding process? And so there was some discussion around that. And I think that's very useful. And so for that reason, along with many others, I'm very happy to be able to attend PAC meetings. And finally, just to conclude, I would say that one of my remarks to the parents at Willis was that parent advocacy is going to be absolutely critical. Yes, this government has no intention of putting any more money into public education, and that is a tragedy. Minister George Abbott has said there'll be winners and losers, and that is unacceptable. And so through our budget process, I am hoping that we can make a very concerted effort, create a strategy to just raise the level of advocacy from our parents, because I think that is going to be central and absolutely significant to the funding issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Knorr. I'd like to now go to Trustee McNally.
Usual microphone and paper restoring here. I'm just going to do a quick report of not such a philosophical statement, although I make those on occasion, but I won't right now. I'm just going to report some things that we did. Trustee Nora and I did attend the BCSTA and BCTC jointly sponsored the Trustee Academy recently in Richmond, and we did find that very interesting. It was quite educational. There was 2 informative days plus an evening plenary. And the agenda and presentation titles are on the BCSTA website for those who'd be interested in seeing the topics addressed. Updates around the negotiations with the BCTF were provided. This was before the fact final appointment, so that's all we know, I guess. I was appointed board liaison for Success by 6, and I did report on that before, but I'm board liaison as well to the Healthy Saanich Committee. And I was actually kind of dreading going to the Healthy Saanich Committee, but it turned out to be very interesting. Steve, I don't remember Steve's name, but last name, but Steve is also on the Success by 6 board, and he was out there to report on some early childhood education initiatives and making Saanich a really child-friendly municipality. And it was actually a fascinating discussion, so I was glad to be there. And I may be getting involved with Swan Lake Christmas Hill Nature Sanctuary along with Trustee Roseman. I'm not quite sure about that part yet, but I really look forward to it. I lived beside that lake for many years, and it's a local treasure. Planning to attend Music by the Dockyard at Esquimalt High. I'm really looking forward to that after that amazing OK concert and other concerts I've been to. All over Canada, it's Pink Shirt Day on February 29th, and I urge everybody to remember the homophobic bullying roots of that Pink Shirt Day. Remember Nova Scotia and the 2 grade 12 boys who wore pink shirts the next day after they said they had had enough of a fellow student being bullied for wearing a pink shirt to school. March 5th is UVic Idea Fest. That should be fascinating. And I look forward to finally meeting parents at the Esquimalt PAC, the Macaulay PAC, the Lieutenant Craig Flower Parent Social Impact, and looking forward to the Esquimalt High Concert Band. Oh, also I'm going to go to Vic West Studies at Learn at noon. That should be actually a little fun. Just personally, I was made aware of an Aboriginal education intensive for Camosun staff given by Camosun Aboriginal staff, and it's really intense. It has an online component and a face-to-face component, and I'm really getting an education here. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Do you want to share anything about previous years in the Big High Band?
We played in the Cameron Band Shell, and I played bass. It was the highlight of highlights.
With Mr. Enby. Thank you. Are there any further trustees that wish to make a report? Seeing none, I'll move into my report, and I will try and just summarize. It's been, as a chair, it's become my full-time job. I love it. It's challenging. It's a lot of research. I think I spend most of my time here. I have had the pleasure of making introductory remarks to a large number of new parents with children who will be entering kindergarten in September 2012. It was great to see such energy and interest in our public education. I visited with the superintendent, the Cecilia Street staff, and I attended with our vice chair, Trustee Horsman, the principals meeting. I had the opportunity, along with Trustee Horsman, Alpha, and I believe McNally and Nor, to attend a social with the GBTA and engage in conversation with some of our teachers. Hi, Barb. Our first public budget meeting was held on February 1st at SJ Willis, and while there wasn't a large attendance, the questions and concerns but were very thoughtful and actually had a lot of facts backing their concerns. And the notes from these meetings will be added to previous information gathered for our budget deliberations. Another issue of importance to this board is our district hosted a meeting on February 7th at the Craig Flower School, inviting parents to give their views to the municipalities of Saanich and Royal and the New Bridge. This meeting was well attended by both parents and members of the community. Afterwards, we were advised that the questions raised at this meeting were the best that had been received to date. Our facilities director, Seamus Howley, continues to work with both municipalities and will be bringing forward recommendations to the board. The superintendent and I met with Mayor Borton on February 10th, 2012, and discussed how we can better work together, and we're looking forward to another meeting in the near future. We're in the process of setting up a meeting with Mayor Niels Jensen in Oak Bay, as we want to connect with all of our municipalities and see how we can best work together. I had the opportunity to be invited to Monterey Middle School to view Ted Harrison's paintings, which I absolutely love. But what was even more delightful was, pardon me, when I arrived, I had 3 grade 7 leadership students that were waiting for me, Lauren, Quinn, and Zoe, that took me to the library where Ted's paintings and his books were. And we had a delightful conversation about his paintings and how somebody can just have that vision. But I was more impressed, I think, with the maturity, the eagerness, and the poise these young girls showed to me. They were obviously, and rightfully so, very proud of their school. And I think their school should be very proud of the wonderful ambassadorship they showed to me. I attended Hillcrest Storybook Day, which was wonderful. Staff and students, Gang Barb, were dressed as different storybook characters, and everyone was having a wonderful time. When I arrived, Elaine Dolan, the principal, and along with the student, were handing out cupcakes that looked like spaghetti and meatballs to all the classrooms. The student's mother had made all of the cupcakes for the school, which, even given that she's a caterer, I thought was phenomenal. I didn't get a cupcake. And on Valentine's Day, I took my husband to the Oak Bay Band recital. We really enjoyed it. It was a great way to spend the evening together. There was a silent auction before the performance and during the intermission. And I must report, I was very happy that my husband's bid on the GPS was successful, because if anyone knows me, they know I'm directionally challenged, so this will make my life a lot easier. And trustees McAvoy, McNally, and Norr also attended. Some very good news. We met with the GBTA on February 15th to discuss local bargaining, and we will again be meeting this Thursday, the 23rd. My observation, and I think the others from our side of the table, was that it was a very good day of respectful and healthy discussion, and we look forward to the same on Thursday. Also, on the good news, on the advocacy front, which all of us are talking about, this morning, John Gateman, Deborah Corville, and I met with the representative for Children and Youth, Mary Ellen Chappelle-Bougon, and her staff members. I had requested this meeting to ask for her support and cooperation in advocating with us to the Minister of Education for more support for students. I specifically spoke to the need for increased resources for special education. The conversation centered on how to ensure each student receives all the support they require to succeed. It was most encouraging to hear that Mary Ellen made the commitment to continue to speak to the Minister of Education regarding our concerns, which she shares around the issues of class size and composition. In addition, Mary Ellen also invited me to meet with her Special Education Advisory Committee to continue the dialogue and further the understanding of the challenges we face in supporting our wide diversity of learners. And this is where our board is not going to be continuing to sit on its hands, but seeking out high-profile advocates so that not only the students, but the teachers and the educational assistants, our ASA, our PP staff are fully supported in the classrooms, however that may be. And the discussions need to start happening with all of our educational partners at the table. So it's a start. I think it's a good start. I will be seeing the minister tomorrow because I'll be attending budget in the afternoon, and there's a reception after. I'm not going to buttonhole him. However, I will take an opportunity to suggest that we need to meet as soon as possible to further discuss the needs and with removing the caps, how we support those students and the teachers in the classroom. And that concludes my report for this evening. Thank you. We now move to Diane McNally's motion, F3, I believe, which is the recording of votes. And Trustee McNally, if you would like to put forward your motion.
Thank you, Chair. You seconder, do I?
Yes.
Okay, Botman. In order to be a bit more coherent this time, I've actually written this one out. So I'm going to start and read it. So first of all, I want to address the secretarial overload. You know, I just want to be cognizant of creating extra work for various people who have to back up what I asked for. I just want to recognize that. I was in the same room as a group of 10, along with a very capable recording secretary last week, and the recording secretary kept up a very fast-moving conversation amongst the 10 people at the table with no apparent problem. And I did check to see if the secretary was attributing conversational contributions to individuals, and that was occurring. So this is what executive level secretaries and assistants know how to do, and many other skills that they have. So the recording and attribution didn't slow the conversation down at all. Now, among the local governance bodies here that we all know, the local governance bodies that record votes are the Vancouver School Board. I have email support from the Vancouver Board Chair, and I specifically asked her about any legal obstacles to implementing recording and any legal difficulties that they may have had as a result of recording. And her reply was that there have never been any legal issues with the record, and it has never been contentious. Comox School Board both records votes and videos of the meetings, and they have reported that it does not slow down the meetings or create more work. CRD records votes, and the Victoria City Council So I will close here for my opener.
Just for clarification, before we go to the speakers list, your motion, it remains that the mover and seconder will be recorded?
The mover second, no. I had actually wondered if, there was some discussion with various people about that, and if there was an amendment, I would be open to that.
So, well, you can amend your own motion when you put it on the floor.
I'll do that then, sure.
Okay, so would you like to read out what your motion should be for discussion, please?
That all votes will be recorded in the minutes with the trustee's name and yes, no, or abstain. Absent trustees' names will be recorded as absent for the vote.
Thank you, Trustee McNally. I now call on Trustee Ferris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the amended motion, and my understanding is that this is something that we can easily accommodate and will provide value to some members, many members of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ferris. Now go to Trustee Alva.
I'm speaking in favor of this motion. I think that as has been said before, many public bodies are now doing this, are recording votes and reporting them out in the minutes. I think that in a time where government is being asked to be more transparent, that includes school boards. So I'm strongly supporting this motion because I think it does help with transparency.
Thank you, Trustee Alpha. I'm sorry, I was just clarifying something with the Secretary Treasurer. I apologize. I'd like to now ask Trustee Lauren Kaluga to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also speaking in favor of the motion. I believe in openness, transparency, and accountability to our electorate. I believe wholeheartedly in that, and I feel that as elected officials that we must be accountable to the public who voted for us. We represent them at the table, and I don't see this as old trustees versus new trustees, nor do I see it as just plain politics, as some have alluded to. I see this as part of our democratic society, and it is my responsibility to ensure that I am accountable for my decisions. The public should not have to wait for 3 years to hold me accountable.
Thank you. Trustee McAvoy.
I have a couple of comments. I just actually had a question. I think perhaps it's to the mover. When we say all votes, technically we vote on our agenda, we vote, and I presume we don't mean to take a roll call on agendas, adjournments, that sort of thing. Is that right?
That's the intent of the motion, Trustee McAvoy. If you'd like to make an amendment to say perhaps substantive motions, I'd be fine with that. Do you feel that's necessary?
I don't think it's necessary. I think the chair could probably make guidance to maybe other motions that we vote to kind of so much or whatever. I wouldn't see the purpose of doing roll calls and that sort of thing. But clearly that the intent is to deal with substantive items, which I would support as a resolution actually. But I would also like to, at the same time, pay some deference to some of the predecessors that have served on this board, whether it was George J. or Margaret Jenkins or Tony Cobbs or Carol Pickup, who's a previous chair, Carol James, who led this board. I would think, and they would say, no doubt, that they led very transparent boards, very democratic boards, very accountable boards to the community. And I can say quite clearly here in this room that on major items where this board has, in my 10 years experience, has had some difficult items to grapple with, I can assure you, people were very clear on how I voted. I can also tell you I have the willingness to show for some of those efforts. So in terms of transparency, this to me, I don't have any difficulty with it. And I suspect if you ask previous chairs like James and Pickup and so forth, they would say, well, people look at the minutes to see what the business of the board was and what they did. And they could see if the motion was carried and so forth. That said, I think there's some value in having people's names attached to the vote. It's not without precedent, by on some major issues like school closure. If you look at the minutes, you will see that those votes, I think back in 2003, were actually recorded. All of those votes were recorded for posterity. I would also note that in fact that we would, Trustee indicated, we would, I think, probably be maybe the third board in British Columbia to have recorded votes. Two others that I'm aware of. Other boards will note sometimes negative votes. I note that Trustee Brian previous board, Sanesh, I'm not sure that they actually recorded the votes, but who knows, if they become part of a trend that picks up some tendency around the rest of the province. The other thing I would say about this in terms of transparency is transparency is not just putting names down on a piece of paper. It's about our collective responsibility, and I'm going to just turn around, if I may, for a moment, and talk to some of our colleagues. And I know the Times columnist recently, and Lindsay Hines has been here, and the Black Press is here on a, I would say, a more sporadic basis. But I think it's all of our responsibilities as representatives of organizations, if you're VC PACs and BDTA, to take that information back to members, and for the media to be here, I would say, on a hopefully a more regular basis to report to the public. I think that's how we become even more transparent, beyond just putting names on a piece of paper, which I think is important. So I think thanks to the number of motions raised this forum, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Trustee McAvoy. Are there any further speakers? Trustee Horseman, are you still awake? Do you have anything to add to this? Thank you, Trustee Horseman. I'm passing the gavel over to you, so to speak, because I just want to make a comment as well with respect to this motion. We talk about common sense, which unfortunately is not as common as we would like. I would see this as that we would record votes when there's two motions, not to accepting the agenda, adjournment, those sorts of things. It's the motions that are brought forward, that the record should reflect what's happening. And I agree with Trustee Loring Kahunga about the old guard versus the new trustees, and I certainly, I don't know where that came from. I think it was there from the media. I think that as a board we work together, and there's value in everything that is brought to the board by every member. Whether you're a new trustee or a seasoned trustee, everyone has value that they can bring to the debate and discussion. As Trustee Horseman has said, if this is what the public wants, if they see this as being the way to be transparent, and we believe we've done, and we know by research that we haven't done anything wrong in the past, and we've had recommendations from registered parliamentarians and reading Robert's Rules of Orders, and I'm very happy that Trustee McNally removed the requirements for recording the mover and seconder, because those can be very misleading if someone were to look at it. Having said all of that, I'm just going to cut off on anything further and just say I'm happy to support this motion. It's something that I've practiced in principle ever since I've been elected, so I don't see a problem with this. I'll exercise my right/responsibility to record my votes. Thank you. And thank you to Diane for bringing this forward and with the amendments. Any further speakers to the motion? Trustee McNally, do you have any comments to close?
I believe I've made my thoughts clear about this. I don't need to close the answer.
Okay, then I would ask all of those in favor to clearly raise their hands and keep their hands up. Wow, we got a unanimous vote. Do we need to record when it's unanimous, or can we just record it as unanimous? Oh, isn't that nice? And that's easy, George. There you go. Okay, so moving back. We are now going on to Section C, the Education Policy Development Committee, and on to Trustee Alpha.
Good luck, y'all. Thank you. I'm not going to go into great detail because we have a number of motions coming forward this evening. And I'm just going to refer you to our minutes on page 14 and make the comment that we had an excellent presentation that Judy Moss brought in with Valen Marshall and Susan Simons on the Black History Awareness Society and the web page that they're developing for use by educators. I learned a lot about the history of Black people in our province, and I think this will be a valuable resource for teachers and for students. So you can read that over. The marine biology piece was reviewed. Mr. Dave Thompson, the principal of Oak Bay, brought forward a request that we change it from biology 11 to marine biology 12. And we carried the motion, but we're bringing it to the board. And I would like to move that motion for approval by the board at this point, please.
Sir, is there a seconder? We have a seconder? We don't need a seconder at committee, and when this has come out of committee, my apologies. So is there any discussion on the recommended motion that we rename marine biology 11 to marine biology 12? Seeing no.
I'd like to say that I would like to congratulate the staff at Oak Bay High School for such a well-put-together. And it's apparent that grade 11 and grade 12 will be well team, so they'll get grade 12 credit for it. And I think it's very, very important.
Thank you, Trustee Horsman. Are there any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Wow. Okay, George, another easy one for you. That was a unanimous vote. Thank you, trustees. We'll now move on to C2.
Just one more bit. We also had a presentation follow-up on the story of Broke, which is an interesting video that was presented by a member of the public. And administration is going to review the video and just make a decision as to whether it's going to be a web-based resource that will be recommended by the district. But as was pointed out at the meeting, many people are already aware of the story of Broke and the story of stuff and use it in their classes. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Alpha. Trustee Leonard.
Thank you. We had a very busy meeting and a big agenda for our ops meeting. I'm going to just go right to the first recommended motion. I'm going to do in the order number 1, then number 7, and then the middle 5, because that's sort of how they break down. The first motion was brought to our attention to make sure that all trustees can be at the final budget meeting. We were tweaking our dates by 2 days, and so this motion was put forward and carried at the ops meeting for the consideration tonight.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Anybody that wishes to speak to this? Trustee McAvoy.
I'm with you to say thank you to my colleagues for putting this forward.
Are there any further comments, or Trustee Nora?
I won't be voting for this motion because Mayor wishes.
I'm sorry, you're saying you're not supporting this motion. Okay, thank you. Are there any further?
Sir, just to clarify, so I think from what you're saying, you're not opposing so much the moving from the Wednesday to a Monday. You're thinking it should even be moved further out in the future.
Seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, keep your arms up, please, because this is not... Okay, George, can you write down the initials of those that are in favor, please? Well, I think we'll start, we'll make up a sheet, but for the time being, are you supporting Diane? Are you asking a question? Wait, you're not. This is, yeah. Hold your hand up if you're in support. And Bev has already supported, said she, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, all of those opposed? 1, 2, 3. You got the initials there? So the motion is carried and so ordered. Thank you.
So we're going to motion number 7. We had Seamus Howley, Director of Facilities, talk to us and heard some feedback from some of the trustees that had attended the meetings at Craig Flowers School. And it was brought out at that meeting that it was Saanich staff who were directed to come up with how the students were going to cross the water. And so we just didn't want to let staff decide. We wanted to bring the politicians into the decision. So to make sure that their politicians knew how we felt and wanted to hear our voice about what was our preference to crossing the water. So we've asked the chair to write a letter to Saanich with our preferred choice for crossing the water, and that's where this motion came from.
Thank you, Trustee Leonard. Are there any comments or questions? Trustee Norm.
Just as a point of clarification, so what specifically are we recommending? The floating
Did you want to? Okay. Are there any further questions? The footbridge. Yeah. There's also the walking bridge, the pedestrian. And there may be some need of some...
I think the letter can reflect
small busing. We're in the process of writing that letter.
Right, the discussion was that the letter would reflect what our community wanted and the school communities wanted, as opposed to, well, just what we wanted. We wanted the council to know what we wanted as a district. Yeah. Instead of staff recommending to Saanich Council what they do.
Exactly, and as I said, the staff from Saanich and V Rural that were there were very impressed with the high degree of, you know, the questions that were asked and the concerns that were raised from both the parents and the community. Yes, Trustee Norm?
Just one more question. I know that one of the playgrounds needs to be moved, and so my question is, will Craig Flower have to pay for the installation? Is it covered through the amount of money?
Any of these enhancements will are being negotiated with, as I said in my report, our Director of Facilities, Seamus Howley, is in negotiations. I don't think he has anything further to report, so at such time as he will, he'll be making recommendations for the board to consider. We'll be looking to maximize whatever we can for our school there. Okay? So seeing no further speakers, I'll call the questions. All those in favor, raise your hands. Oh, we have another unanimous. This are getting off easy.
Motions 2 through 6. If the board, if it's their pleasure, because we have lots of things to come, that we could move them as a block if no one has any questions on them. They are housekeeping items, so to speak. They are just updating our policies and regulations, and these are all policies that they have not changed the intent of them, but just brought them into the year that we're in, as opposed to being 1979, 1991. They brought them into current practice for us by tweaking school district to Board of Education, items like that. So if there were no questions, we can move it forward as a block, or we can do them one at a time, and I'll take direction.
Diane, Trustee McNally, and then I will pass the gavel, so to speak, over to Bev to ask a question.
Yeah, so thanks. The only one I see here that I could actually just pass right now would be the Perks Clinic funding, because Perks Clinic, it's an obsolete policy. The others do have some problematic parts for me.
We can do it one at a time then.
I'll do one at a time.
Okay, number 2. Form a committee to develop a policy on building school culture with a set of guiding principles for schools to follow. So, rationale was brought forward. We had thorough discussion on all of these, so that's there for the board's consideration.
Trustee McNally.
So I see the part about form a committee, and either I can't remember, or it was never clarified what the protocol for forming a committee would actually be. Can anybody clarify that for me? Because if it's not in place right now, clearly understood as part of this motion, we need to talk about that more.
I believe that this came out of the Educational Partners Council, and that this was going to deal with a number of issues. We were going to be drawing on our public partners as well, and dealing with issues when we talk about building school culture with a set of guiding principles. It would be inclusive of our bullying initiatives and that sort of thing. Superintendent can probably add more to that, because he's on, he's part of that working group.
If I understand the question correctly, you're wondering about how the committee is actually formed?
So basically, if there's going to be a vetting process for who's on it, and what the process will be.
When we form committees, we send invitations to all of our stakeholders, asking them to bring people onto the committee. There might be some people that have a real interest in this policy that we might seek out and tap on the shoulder if they would like to join us as well. But other than that, it would be going on each of the stakeholder groups.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. And Trustee Norm.
Just one more question. I'm wondering if we will be setting aside some funding to support this, or are we going to make every effort to have these meetings outside of the school block?
My understanding, and the superintendent can add to this if I've missed anything, is to minimize any cost to the district. So, having meetings in the evening if we can, doing everything we can to minimize that, yes, because communities can be costly if especially we want to have our school staff involved, and then there's, replacement costs and those sorts of things. So, did you want to add anything more to that? Did you have something further, Deborah?
I was just thinking perhaps we should consider that there might be a need to, for instance, EAs. If we wanted to have some of our groups like that, our EA employees be part of the discussion. I think it would have to be during school time.
I think the superintendent and then Trustee Leonard.
Might I suggest that we might be a bit premature? This is often an issue that we run into. Parents who work during the day can't take off time from the regular work to be there, and our friends in 947 and 382 would prefer that we held it during the school time, and we'll try to work something out and then bring it back to the board for some advice.
Trustee Leonard.
Just the discussion at the board table was, we asked if there could be some kind of costing, if there was going to be costing brought to us, and we were assured that prior to it going ahead, there would be some kind of costing so that we would know if there was going to be any finances involved or what they could possibly be.
Thank you for that clarification, Trustee Leonard. Are there any further speakers to this motion, to this recommended motion? Seeing none, I'll ask all those in favor. We have a unanimous. It's just because we have Trustee Leonard?
Number 3 on our docket here is that we adopt revised policy 2221, department heads for secondary schools. So again, it was just cleaning up the language. It wasn't changing how department heads are handled at each school. At each school, we were sure it does do it differently, so it was just cleaning up the language.
Trustee McNally and Tara would like to speak.
So I recall thinking about this and reading it and discussing it and coming away feeling that what we were left with really should be dealt with at the bargaining table. It is issues that affect our employee group futures, and so I'm not thinking that this is one I can support being in favor of here. I would recommend that it be sent back to ops, I guess, for reconsideration. We need to reconsider it somewhere. I don't know where to send it. Pardon?
Not changing anything.
All right, well, I'll just have to say I can't support it.
The superintendent would like to make a response. I'm sorry, Tara, you still are on the list, but just...
These are, what we're trying to do is just update them. If there's something more that we have missed, just send it back to us and we'll bring it forward again. It's not something that has to be completed tonight by you. So it's not an issue.
Tara.
Thanks. Yeah, we did have a look at this, and I don't believe it's wording that is consistent with the collective agreement, so I would suggest that it would be a better process to have it come to us for discussion prior to changes.
So what we're suggesting is that it will go back through DLT and to connect with the union to make sure that we're not messing with the collective agreement language. I'd like to, yeah, sure, yeah. We want to make sure it's nice and clean and that we're not creating more grievances unnecessarily. Are there any further comments or questions with respect to, actually, Elaine, I'm sorry, you're supposed to be doing all this. We're going to, I think it's going to...
And it'll come back through eventually. When it's vetted. Number 4, the Board of Education, number 61 is late policy 6172 GR Perks Clinic funding. It was a redundant policy. It no longer, GR Perks Clinic funding no longer exists, so we were just removing it from our books.
Elaine, it's it's yours. I shouldn't be, you're the chair of this.
No, you still have to call for the votes and everything. All I do is present it.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anybody? Seeing none, I'd like to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have another unanimous vote. I didn't ask for opposed, but common sense prevailed that when it's unanimous, I wouldn't ask for an opposition vote. Okay? Just for clarification, I do know.
Number 5, that the Board of Education Schools District 61 adopt the revised policy 2105 district leadership team. I believe we did go back and forth and wordsmith it a tiny bit just to make it clearer, and this is what we came up with at the end.
I
I see Trustee Lauren Kahunga and Trustee Nor. Trustee Lauren Kahunga first, please.
Thank you. So when I went through this, I see this as much more than wordsmithing. When I go through it and I see that so much of the intent seems to even be missed, like we have a problem, as I've expressed previously, about not having a strategic plan within the district, and I see that if we're just reacting to the goals and objectives within the achievement contract and the enhancement agreement, that we're really just reacting rather than proacting. So I have an issue with that. I also have an issue with, when I look at this, it seems to move the shift from the board giving direction to the staff, and now the staff giving direction to the board. So that's the second issue. And the third issue I have is I wonder whether it's in any way contrary to our collective agreement. So I would be voting against.
Trustee McAvoy.
I would vote we just refer this back. I mean, these are meant to be, I understand that these are cleaning up and so forth. So if there's substantive concerns, or we need to redo that policy period, unless I'm missing something, it's just that this is the proper forum.
If I could just jump in here, these questions were discussed. All of the questions that Edith has brought up were discussed at the meeting. So if they need to be vetted through the meeting again, and you want to ask them at the next meeting, you can, because they were all discussed, and
Those questions were answered.
they were at the time. Yeah, and the rationale was given for why the language is as it is.
So are we moving forward? Trustee Norris, sorry.
So just having an opportunity to think about it since our ops meeting, I wondered, in the second paragraph that was struck, it says that the Board of School Trustees in School District 61 directs the superintendent of schools to submit all regulations pertinent to the job descriptions of the members of the district leadership team. So I noticed that, of course, we have a superintendent job description and associate superintendents, but I'm wondering where are the other job descriptions?
They're in the, you mean the secretary treasurer and
or department people that are like IT department head for IT or special education.
I refer that one through the superintendent to Associate Superintendent Sherrill.
Through the chair. Currently, department heads and DLT are looking at all the job descriptions and updating them as well.
Does that help, Diane or Deborah?
So I'm at the mercy of the board here. We can refer it back and go through it again, or we can just put it to a vote, because it's not something that has to be unanimous. There were 7 trustees at the ops meeting. The chair can make that decision, or you can ask for a show of hands.
I think we can put it to a vote. It was, discussed, and if there's further questions on this, that certainly Trustee Lori Kahunga can get follow-up on those questions, and unfortunately you weren't able to be at that meeting. And I think you'll be satisfied with the answer. So I'll put the question to the trustees, those in favor of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. Those opposed? So Trustee Lori Kahunga is opposed, so all of us are in favor. That makes it easier. Trustee Leonard? No, you have one more.
Sorry, the Board of Education, School District 61 adopt the revised policy 2115, associate superintendent. Similar to the one previously, it was again cleaning up the language, and most of the questions that were of issue to the first one were of issue to this one, and the rationale was the same. So I think we should carry on and put it to a vote this evening as well.
Are there any speakers? Trustee McNally.
Trying to think how to word this. I voted for the previous item. No, just right now. And I'm hearing Trustee Lori Gahanga's concerns about the strategic plan. And here we go again, having the strategic plan crossed out, and everything based on the achievement contract and the Aboriginal enhancement agreement. Am I looking at the right thing? Regulation 2115?
I'm sure, just, excuse me, Trustee McNally, but I'm not sure which.
It looks like I'm on the wrong page.
Yeah.
Literally.
We're looking at number 6 under the ops, that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, adopt the revised policy 2115, Associate Superintendent. Are you okay? You're there? Trustee Nora.
I'm wondering if I can call on Mr. Painter to just give us a review of the definitions, the distinction between responsible and accountable, because I'd like to know and I'd like to consider.
Actually, that would be out of order to ask a member of the public to provide that information. We do have people that's their job.
All right, so then I will be voting for it because I think it deserves a second vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Lauren Kahunga.
So, thank you, Chair. So just making sure we're on regulation, we're on policy 2115.
Yes.
Right, along with the regulation. So again, I have the same problem that again, we're removing strategic planning from everything, and I just have a real problem with that. At least my regulation 2115 under specific responsibilities 1.0 with strategic planning, achievement contract and the Aboriginal enhancement agreement is replacing that and all through the document. So I will vote against it for the same reasons of why I voted against the other one.
Just for clarification, Trustee, we're only voting on the policy. The regulations, which shows how we apply the policy, are not changing. If that makes any difference to the way you vote, there's no changes to the regulations, just the policy. The regulations are for information. Sorry,
The regulations have changed, but they're not voted on in the motion. They come to us for information only.
That's right.
So the only thing we're voting on is page 43.
That's right.
They need to be voted because they are the umbrella for the regulation.
Exactly. And Trustee Horsman, did you want to? Okay, trust.
I just want to say that it's not outside the realm of possibility that the board would engage in strategic planning in the future, but it would have to be put together as a package for the budget and be approved because strategic planning is a very expensive undertaking. So, you know, if trustees want to do the work do that, then package to work on the board and budget. But taking it over this particular policy does not mean that we would not engage in strategic planning.
Trustee Lauren Kahunga.
Just in response to Trustee Horstman's comments, to me, policy development is long-term. It's not only currently looking at our needs right now and the way we're doing business, but it's around looking at our future needs as well. And so if we remove strategic planning from there, so right now, yes, we do have the enhancement agreement and we have the Aboriginal achievement, the Aboriginal enhancement agreement and achievement contract. But I see that as so reactive. And I feel that really policy in our school district, why we're going through all of these right now is because practice is not following our current policy. So we're really going to be serious. Let's look at the future needs of our district as well as current and adapt our policy to meet those needs so that we're not back doing the same thing in a couple of years.
Just a point of clarification, we're actually changing the policies to reflect our current practice. Are there any further speakers to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? Trustee Lorcan and Trustee Norm. Thank you. We'll now move on to, the superintendent has no report this evening, so we're moving on to D2, Secretary Treasurer's report. George, it's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This time of year, every year in February, we have a forecast of where we're going to go with our fiscal year budget. Leading into the next part where we need to pass motions and bylaws related to our revised operating budget for this year. The first chart is one where we've been showing it over the past years. The pink line on the top indicates what our cost to educate a student is on a per student basis for each of the years shown, going back to 2003. The dashed line underneath, which never quite meet that pink line, is the amount of our operating grants that we get. Each year we have to find savings some way, someplace, and other things in order to match, to allow us to have a balanced budget. This gap is really part of our structural deficit, and this year it's over $8 million. So we have to work hard, continuously work, and look at ways of saving money to come up and keep that gap closed where we can maintain a balanced budget. In doing our work at this point in time, we've gone through and reviewed all revenue and expense line items in our budget for the year, and we're still projecting because it goes, our fiscal year is from July 1st, 2011 to June 30th, 2012. So obviously we don't have actual expenses for all of February, March, April, May, or June. So, however, we project, according to this, an operating budget surplus as a result of the items that we show up here. So how do we get this projected one-time carry forward number? Well, last year end, our fiscal year end, the board, knowing that fiscal year 12-13 would cause us some problems and would be in a deficit situation, the board approved in September the movement of the dollars left over from last year, the $835,000, to be carried forward to the 12-13 budget. So that amount was approved by the board last September. In December of 2011, as part of the provincial holdback release, where each year when the September 30th counts come in, the budget, or the provincial budget for education is reallocated based upon the number of actual students in all the various items, various areas. We received $2,474,000 in additional funding. We reported that to the board in letters, and I believe talked about it in the January meeting passing. We also have, that's new funding, one-time funding that we really can't take on because it depends on provincial estimates. The additional revenue consists of several sources of additional revenue. We receive a credit from the Bank of Montreal for using our district credit cards. So rather than giving us discounts and everything else, because we're a collective, the Bank of Montreal gives us money. We buy our office supplies or non-office supplies. They give us a rebate. These are things that we negotiated when we went to tender. And we also have better interest rates, and because we receive a chunk of money all at once, haven't had a chance to spend it with higher interest rates, we receive additional interest income. So that amounts to our additional revenue of $280,000. The next large amount of $890,000 relates to our benefits. Our benefits for dental, for drugs, those types of benefits, are really not an insurance plan. We're what's called technical insurance terminology is an ASO basis. So if we don't utilize those dentist calls, we don't buy all the drugs that the actuary is supposed to expect, because these are cost estimates are based upon actuarial evaluations done by consulting firms. If it's not a bad flu season, there's not a lot of people going to the drugstore, there's not a lot of hard candy breaking fillings in your teeth, our actual costs are lower. So these are cost savings to the board. So it's more than we budgeted. The next item is decreased average teacher salary. When we create a budget, we estimate, we come up with an average teacher salary for the year. The average teacher salary turns out to be what we get. So we're doing this estimate in February, March. And then we come along to September, October, we see what we actually hired. This obviously is indicating that we have a lot more lower echelon teachers, lower on the pay grade. That saved us some money. The decreased absences, that's straightforward. That's actual sick leave utilization. Our sick leave is down versus what it has been. So that's for teachers in QB 382 and exam staff. Our salary, our sick days are down, saving the district money. Unfilled positions. We talked, named some names in the camera session that we talked about. But these are people not being replaced on an ongoing basis. The majority of those were on the management side that we haven't filled our positions. We're trying to see if we can get along without it. So those were costs built into the budget for this year that we didn't utilize, and therefore we can free that amount of money up. Excuse me. The next item, the trustees heard about parts of this one. Mr. Scott, who's here tonight to answer other questions that you did, talked about having come up with additional students this year. We brought in more students than we built budget on. And therefore, he has increased profitability from bringing in those extra students. And he also has had some, we treat his separately, but he's had some leaves of absence, maternity leaves, those types of things where the staff hasn't been replaced. There's staff savings in there. Because the staff hasn't been replaced, they haven't traveled as much. Savings there, but you have to carry on traveling in the future, or else you lose those businesses. We've had additional success from companies such as Mexico, because parents now don't want their child just to be in Canada for 1 year, but perhaps 2 or 3 years, which saves us the repeat ongoing cost of those types of things. And we're getting more into the way we can schedule things as groups. Having done now in some of these countries many years, Dave has developed a good network of people to keep feeding us these on an effective basis. So that generated $680,000. The second largest number on here is departmental budget savings. We all knew, the board especially knew, that the 2012-2013 budget season was not going to, we did not believe it would be a pretty picture, but we have a structural deficit. We've been fighting for years. The structural deficit is in excess of $80 million. So department heads were all asked to consider items that they could defer, not spend. What could we do to save money in order to avoid layoffs? So things, HR delayed doing some of their items on some of the training. Seamus in facilities delayed purchasing large equipment for at least a year. Those are the types of things that we delayed. In the superintendent, assistant superintendents, associate superintendents departments, what they've done, because they're responsible for a lot of the professional development, money's in those accounts because of the teacher job action couldn't be spent. So we have those monies left over, including some of the supplies for those types of items. So some of those funds we're unable to use because of that, but all the departments went through and came up and scraped all the budgets, came up with this kind of savings. Going through the last item on here for $380,000 is their utilities and waste management. Previous boards made hard decisions about what to do and how we came up with our money. The previous board made a decision that we would take some money and invest in some capital costs. The capital being working with our QB382 group to put in energy efficient light fixtures, more efficient boilers, replace the lights in the LED with LEDs. The object at that point in time when we created this program several years ago was to start generating returns, start generating savings. We're still utilizing money to carry on the program, but this year we were saving for future years. This year we're going to start seeing some of those savings. Another interesting thing that is a byproduct of one of the board's other initiatives, the board voted and strongly supported a greening committee, a greening initiative. One of the areas that we're actually seeing some reasonable savings on now is because of this greening committee, in that we're using smaller garbage bins at schools that are being picked up less frequently. That in turn generates us money. So you add up all of this, and it adds up to $8.6 million worth of one-time projected savings. It's a great number, but remember, the next slide, we actually have, we talked about it, we have a deficit, we have a fundamental, not enough money in our system. So there's the $8.6 million we're talking about a minute ago. By going through all of our expenditures based upon projected enrollments, our best estimate of costs to come in the next year, excluding salaries, because we're told it's a 0% mandate, nobody gets a salary increase unless you're moving through the grid. And maintaining status quo in all of the other programs. And for Deborah and I say that to throw in another producer. The funding doesn't get released until March 15th. We believe we know what the funding will be that will match this year's. We use the ministry's funding projection tools. So we believe, using all that information, we'll have an $8,289,000 deficit. You put those two numbers together, we are anticipating that we'll have a one-time this year surplus of $350,000. So that's what we'll be bringing forward in a budget when we bring forward the details in a few weeks, assuming that our other estimates are right. To put it in perspective, $350,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is. However, it's 0.02% of the total budget. It's 1/5 of 1%. So tonight, we'll be asking the board for motions. This is the starting point where the next motion's coming up. Will be the starting point for next year's budget. We have to get an understanding of where this June 30th we're going to end up with before we start the next year. If the board decided that we want to spend $8.6 million between now and June 30th, and not have this one-time carry forward, we can do that. But then we would have to start cutting $8.6 million out of next year's budget. So the staff is recommending that we would appropriate this $8.6 million surplus from the current year and move it forward so that we can build the budget with a $350,000 surplus. And that would be other recommendations of how we should spend that $350,000 surplus. I'm sure we're status here to answer questions.
Are there any questions or?
Trustee McNally.
I'm sure this doesn't reflect the efforts of our Secretary Treasurer and senior staff to explain this budget process and budget to me, but I have too many questions to agree to pass 3 readings tonight. I need another meeting. I need to ask some more questions. I need to think about
agreeing to all 3 readings tonight.
Trustee McAvoy, but before, just the Secretary Treasurer would just like to, I think, respond to Trustee McNally.
Just, you're not approving next year's budget tonight. We're not asking to approve next year's budget. We won't do that until April. Tonight, what we're doing is, according to ministerial orders, we have to approve the revised budget for this fiscal year by the end of February. What we're doing with these slides is showing you where we think this fiscal year is going to come in. And on the basis of where this fiscal year will end up with an $8.6 million carry forward, we will then be able to build a budget for budget discussion around the table with the public in March and April to pass a proper budget in April. This is not to pass the budget tonight, it's only to pass the revised 2011-2012 budget.
Which is required. Trustee McAvoy, Trustee Leonard, and Trustee Laura Kahunga.
Sorry, actually, there was a further question I had about that. So, in terms of the requirement to actually approve this amended budget, when does the ministry expect, or when are we required to report that to the ministry by? February 29th.
Yeah.
And I suppose one option for the board is to spend some of that money now. Is that the idea? I just want to be clear on that. I mean, I'm not advocating that. In fact, we obviously have an issue, challenge we have to deal with in the next fiscal year, and I would want to address that through this. But I suppose in theory, at least, that we could make a decision tonight to put ourselves $1 million in the hole next year and spend before the end of this fiscal, spend some of that money.
How much of that?
Yes, definitely. But the ministry, for each timeline, requires us to file this by the end of February. Yes.
And this, just a point of clarification, and it may be redundant, if so, please, I apologize in advance. As we know, budgets are always our best estimates, and so we're just working on those estimates in order to meet the requirements of the ministerial orders. And, you know, this is kind of I think, a serendipitous kind of confluence of factors that came together to provide this money rather than looking at a huge deficit and cuts where we can actually perhaps put money where it's needed next year, and considering the classroom operating funds or the classroom integration funds, whichever term the government wants to use. I have Trustee Leonard to speak next.
So I just want to try and provide some clarity here. The motions that are on the floor here tell us on June 30th what the projected budget is going to look like at the end of the fiscal year. That's not saying what we have to do with this. All this is ministry requirements to say that at the end of the fiscal year, we will have $183,085,099, and that's our number. So approving or not approving this doesn't have anything to do with spending that or not spending that. All we're doing is stating that in our best estimate, at the end of the year, our budget is projected to be this. And because I have a nod, if I'm clear. So passing this tonight has nothing to do with those numbers, except that this is what the actual number will be, and that's what our surplus will be at the end of the year. But it's not saying what we're doing with it. All it's stating is what we will have on June 30th. And this is a ministry requirement to pass these, but in no way reflects what we're going to do with the money or the decision I think that Trustee McNally is concerned about. So I think we don't talk about that for a minute. We just talk about what's in front of us, do what we have to do legally, requirement, and then we can have those discussions after the fact.
Okay, I have Trustee Lauren Kahunga, Trustee Knorr, and I saw, I think, Diane, Trustee McNally.
Can I just ask a further question?
sorry, we're just keep it in, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. It's too bad that we didn't have, couldn't have had the projections and knowing what our surplus was going to be earlier than now, because, trying to make a decision about spending $8 million in a few months just, obviously is kind of like a fly in the sky. But I do have some questions about, and I don't know whether this was, discussed at the ops meeting, and forgive me if I missed it, but I'm wondering, and I'm looking over on Schedule A1, and I would like a little bit of clarification, because what I see here and what you're telling me up there doesn't seem to match in my opinion, or in my mind, or my way of thinking. So when I take a look at that, we're looking at the total FTE, 18,994,766, and then the total revenue, 165,959, bringing in the total. I'm just trying to figure out how all of this is playing.
Madam Chair, the 18,994.766 is the number of full-time equivalent students that we have. It's not dollars. The top one, that's what FTE stands for, full-time equivalent students.
And also as a point of clarification, trustee, we have been saying that the administration has been working on building the estimates. This is the first opportunity that they've been able to bring this forward, because they've been asking for department heads to be looking at efficiencies, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the earliest they've been able to bring that forward. Anyways, please continue with your questions.
Okay, so under revenue, total revenue, 165,635,959.
You will find the details of that on Schedule A2, the fall page over.
And so, let me finish my question. So when I look at the expense of 182,285,099, and I look at the balance in circles as a deficit of 16,649,140, and then I go down further, another capital asset purchase of 800,000, and then down to 17 million. When I read that, it looks to me as if we have a deficit of 17 million, and somehow that ended up getting erased. I just would like some clarification on that.
Well, so I can rest my voice a little bit, we'll let Deborah respond to that, please.
So the final budget document that's before you is now all the line items have been recalculated based on the actual September 30th enrollment, September 30th, 2011. So last spring, when the preliminary budget was prepared, it's based on a projected enrollment. This amended budget bylaw tonight reflects the actual September 30th enrollment, and what it also does, it brings forward all of the carry forward amounts from the prior year. So the $17,449,140 was the amount of money that was in the financial statements rolled forward at the end of the year. So it reflects the carry forwards, the school funds that were remaining at the end of the year, the amounts of money that were required to address outstanding purchase order commitments, the amounts that were brought forward to carry the department initiatives, and it also includes the amount of the one-time surplus that was budgeted in the spring to be brought forward into this year. So this budget document now builds in all of the monies that are rolled forward from one year to the next and is readjusted to reflect the current year enrollment. So the document itself shows a balanced budget, revenue and expenses. But the presentation that the Secretary Treasurer gave earlier is some of these expenditure line items that are budgeted won't be fully spent. So we're anticipating that at June 30th of 2012, that the amount of cost savings that are contained within these line items are valued at the $8,639,000.
So I understand that, Deborah, and thank you for that. But I still see in the way I understand financial statements is and I'm wondering, was this a projection of a structural deficit of $17,449,140?
That line represents, if you read the description, budgeted prior year operating surplus appropriation. So when this budget document is built, the various carry forward amounts are included in that line item. So it's showing that our expenditure budget, which now brings forward the amounts that were outstanding, so for example, purchase order commitments that were outstanding at June 30th, those values are contained in the expenditure line items. So the revenue to pay for those outstanding commitments is brought forward in the line budgeted prior year operating surplus appropriation.
So in the end, we're still talking about that 183,085,099, which is reflected in this motion, and that's why I have those questions.
That's the value, the aggregate value of the bylaw.
So, no, thank you. I had Trustee Norley.
So I'm going back to what I always go back to, and that is that we have classes in this district that are desperate for financial support, for funding, most particularly, I guess, at this point, in terms of EA support. And I feel like this is an opportunity to discuss the possibility of addressing that between February and June at this point. That's my interest, and I just know that we have classes where that would provide just significant help for them. So I wonder how this plays into this.
Yes, you have time. We don't make the final decisions, as already been said, until April the 16th. This money is just being moved over, and you will have the opportunity to discuss it. But remember, if you are wanting to spend this money by June 30th, to be crossed, what kind of bang for your buck are you going to get in just a few months and still have a deficit next year? So, but we have time to think about that. Trustee Diane, and then I have Trustee Elaine and Trustee Michaels. I'm going now to formal because of the hour. Sorry.
Your client answered my question. Thanks.
Okay. So Trustee Leonard.
I can put the first motion on the floor.
Okay. And your motion?
Oh, that the board receive all three readings of the 11th amended annual budget at the meeting of February 20th.
Okay. And this motion needs to be carried unanimously. So, are there any questions?
Can I just say procedurally, if it's not carried unanimously, it can be done by full vote later in the week.
Yes, you're correct. Trustee McNally and Trustee McAvoy.
A question about the poll vote. If it's not carried unanimously here, it wouldn't carry a poll vote.
It's just it's two readings.
Okay.
Yeah. Michael?
Just to come back to the, actually, Trustee Leonard, I think I got it clear in my head, which is that you're not endorsing the way we're allocating money in classrooms or anything like that right now. We're just saying this is the projection as is. We'll report it out, but it does not prevent you or any way bring, if you want to come back to the meeting and say, given where we are, looking down the end of this year, I propose to spend X jobs or whatever, or something else. Feel free to do that, and that's dated. But that doesn't change the reality of the projection at this point. That's all. Just we have to sign that off. I don't have to. That doesn't have any problem.
The estimated projections. And Trustee Alpert.
Just to check, this is a question to Deborah Laser. So my understanding is this, and I could be completely wrong, that the first budget developed for 2011-2012 was because it had to be developed before budget that we're discussing right now is an actual amended budget based or updated budget based on the information that we received on September 20th or September 30th. Is that correct? Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. This is for unanimous, has to be carried unanimously. We've got 1, 2, 3, 6. It's not carried unanimously, but keep your hands up so that we know who's voted, please. Trustee Horsman voted in support. So actually, who voted in opposition was Trustee Noor and Lauren Munda, which is the easier way. So that means that we'll do full vote. Trustee Leonard.
Third reading will be full vote.
Yeah.
Third reading will be full vote. Can I put the second motion on the floor, please, that the Board of Education School District 61 amended annual budget bylaw for this sheet for 2010-11 in the amount of 183, 085, 099 be read for the first time, the second time, and third time. Thank you. First time, the second time, sorry.
Yeah. Good try. Okay, all those in favor?
Question, we're not reading for the third time here.
No, we're not. It didn't carry, so that's why Trustee Leonard explained it was only for 2. So we have who's voting in opposite. Bev, what's your vote?
Aye.
Okay, so we have Nora and Lori Kahunga in. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Oh, thank you. So I think the only one is which is actually an oxymoron and is no, but anyways, fine. Note that if you would. So, Trustee Leonard.
So just to get things rolling here. I have 2 motions that I'd like to put forward, and the reason I'll read them both first is so that you can see my rationale before you jump on the first one or jump on the second one. It wouldn't really matter which order I did them, but I'll read them first and then see if I get a second. My first motion is to move the projected surplus of $8.639 million to be applied to the 2012-2013 budget shortfall. And I'll explain my rationale if I get a second. And then my second motion would be that $350,000 projected surplus be applied to class size and composition. Okay, so wait and see.
Is there a seconder to?
The first motion first is the 8.639 to be to the 2012-2013 budget shortfall. If I get a second, I'll explain.
Chair, where does this come from? Is this a motion from the floor?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to deal with it from the floor on this.
Okay, how it was written and, you know.
No, not in this case. When you're dealing with the budget, when we're just getting a projection, you can deal with those on the floor. And when we did our trustee orientation, remember we did talk about some of this, but yes. So is there a seconder to Trustee Leonard's motion?
Would you say it again, please?
For first vote or
move that the projected surplus of $8.639 million be applied to the 2012-2013 budget shortfall. That's the next year, fiscal year starting July 1st.
And we have a seconder. Motion's on the floor. Is there any discussion? Trustee McNally.
So,
I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself.
So this is the first time I've seen the numbers tonight as well. So the curve went like that. We had the pink line and the dotted line. We have a structural deficit in this district. We've had it for a number of years. We've been very lucky to have been able to move one-time only funding forward for about 4 or 5 years now, Secretary Treasurer. 4 or 5 years, we've been moving about $8 million forward so that we didn't have to lay off $8 million worth of staff. So my personal view is that and I'm hoping the board supports this, is that we don't want to look at laying off $8.6 million worth of staff in an upcoming year. So we have to keep covering this $8 million deficit unless we get some ongoing funding, which would allow us to cover our structural deficit. Our structural deficit means we're paying for more staff than we are getting funding for, and each year we continue to do that, which has been great to have more staff in the classrooms, but we have to keep using one-time funding to move forward. So the one-time funding that we have there is benefits of $900,000, absentees of $600,000, government grants of $2.5 million, international student programs of $680 million. I can go on, but they are not dollars that you can count on to be spent on staffing. In my personal opinion, we must move them forward to make sure we don't have to cut $8 million worth of staffing next year.
Thank you, Trustee Leonard. I have Trustee McNally.
So a couple of questions. If this motion were to pass, does that mean all that money is tied up now and there's no way we could touch it if there was something we really, really needed to apply it to before June? That's question one.
Any motion can be brought forward. This is something our board has done for, well, the past 5 or 6 years to think about the year coming up as well. And that's why I read my second motion, so you would know that I was cognizant of what's happening this year.
Let me just follow up on that. I'm taking a very simple-minded approach to this because that's what I have to do when it's this budget. I just feel completely simple-minded about it. So here's the question. If I felt very strongly that there was a need in a school that was going to cost $50,000 and I wanted to discuss it with all my colleagues here and see if we could spend $50,000 to remedy, and believe me, I don't have anything in mind right now, totally rhetorical. If we had that kind of necessity to put some money before the end of June into a classroom, say, into a situation, could we still do that if your motion passed, or would that money be sewed up for next year?
Through you, Madam Chair, the board can make a motion to spend money at any point in time when they like, as long as the board agrees to it. That can be done. What would happen in this case, assuming everything got approved, right now we have an $8,200,000 problem with an $8,600,000 solution, leaving us $350,000 surplus. If you spent $50,000 in your example, that would reduce the $350,000 that we'd have for next year to, as Trustee Leonard said, spend on classroom support.
Thanks for that. I just have one follow-up question. And so the $8 million a year that we're spending one-time only funding over every year for several years, does that only go to making sure that we don't have to lay off staff, or does it go as well to making sure that we don't have to make other kinds of painful cuts? Is it only targeted to staffing?
Well, 99% are staff.
Good point.
Oh, Trustee Lauren Kamuga.
I mean, I think it's great that we have, a surplus that could be rolled over for next year. I guess my concerns with this is I would like to see a budget prepared for next year. And I know that we never know the numbers, and we're finding out this $8 million because now we're balancing off our books and all of that. But I would really like to see, how do we address this issue for next year, looking at, $182 million budget, and that there is a plan put in place so that we're not making a decision again at the end of the school year. And I know that there's lots of factors that can relate to that, but I think that if at least we had a plan in place, then we could address some of this rather than always again reacting.
I'd just like to address that. I think it's part of what we've been trying to do with our advocacy, and why we're looking for high-profile advocates and talking to the minister and been writing
writing letters asking for stable funding. It's difficult to make, to do the planning. We can try. There's certainly nothing that stops us from doing that, but it's always going to be based on, you know, what today's dollars are, and you know, the further away you get from that, the less accurate you're likely to be. And it would be much easier for us to plan, and that's why what we're requesting from the minister is stable funding in order that we can do exactly what you're asking for, because it only makes sense to do so, if that helps you. Are there any further questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? We have it. Trust and those opposed? Where were you, Diane? Pardon me?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, Diane's abstaining, and Trustee Nora and Laura Kavinga are voting against. Is that all right, just doing it that way, you know, instead of doing it like, yeah, okay, thanks. Just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Yeah. Trustee Leonard.
My second motion is that $350,000 surplus, which we would then be projecting for next year, be applied to class size and composition.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Any discussion? Tara.
Thanks. I'm just interested in how that would be applied to which classrooms and which situations.
We wouldn't know, and we're actually looking that there might be extra money from the ministry when they're talking about their classroom operating funds. It's just that we know that there's a need, and generally speaking, when we've had these one-time surpluses, we've tried to provide them to the classroom. So that would be something that would be developed, I would think, through with administration and school-based teams as to the needs, the greatest needs.
So would this appear as a separate budget line item next year?
George? Yeah, it would be one line. Yeah.
And just for clarification, is one-time only funding for 1 year?
Yeah.
It's not ongoing funding.
Unfortunately. Diane, did you have? Are there any further questions? I should have asked you a second time.
No, I certainly do. Now, it was to do with just following up on Tara's question about how is this going to be allocated, and it seems pretty vague. I mean, I think, I know there's no way really to lay it all out right now how it would happen, but it just sounded like, oh, well, in consultation with school-based teams, and I mean, who's going to make the final, who makes the final judgment? There's needs out here, everybody's got 275, not everybody, but there are many, many needs out here. Who has to be tall and cut the baby in half? I want to know how that's going to happen.
I think we talked about that when we say all educational partners need to get together to find the solutions, because there's many factors that come into this. You know, to support students in the classroom means supporting teachers in the classrooms. You know, so there would have to be some time spent to determine where that money would need to go to. Trustee Alpha?
Well, I think it's really difficult at this point in time to look at the $350,000, and it's not enough. I think that's obvious. When I look at the binders of oversized, or of not oversized classes, but numbers over 3 IEPs, it's immense. And when I look at $350,000, I'm very grateful to see $350,000. I would be even more grateful if it was like $3,500,000, because that would be more along a realistic number for addressing composition in our classes. But that said, it's not really possible to determine where that money is going to go until we actually see the classes at the end of September. And I think as we're moving through that month, it will most likely become fairly apparent to classroom teachers and schools where the money needs to go. I would really hope that the voices of teachers around the needs in their classrooms would be part of the determination of where the $350,000 would go. But that said, it isn't going to be enough. We know that. But I'm grateful for having something anyway.
Thank you, Trustee Alpha. Trustee Leonard.
Just to agree with Trustee Alpha, it's not near enough. I would like it to be far more than the motion. But again, I rely on staff to look where the greatest need is, and we have always had full confidence in them putting the dollars, the limited dollars that we were able to give them, where the greatest need was, and I know that they will do that again.
Thank you. Is there any further? I'll call the question. All those in. Sure. Trustee Leonard.
That the $350,000 projected surplus be applied to class size and composition, and that's for the next year's budget.
Did you get it, Bev?
I did. I just want to make a comment. The thing is that it's up to the budget process to decide how any surplus can be spent. Personally, I would like to see it go towards class size competition. But in terms of the motion forwarding it, I think it would be better to forward that $350,000 to the budget process so that if other trustees or the board decide that there's another direction that they would do that as part of the budget process. I personally would like to see it go to class size competition. I think that's really great to see it. But I would like to see the motion worded so that the discussion that the budget director will be research.
Thanks. Trustee Horton, Trustee Hanson.
Well, in response to Trustee Horstman, I couldn't support that. I think that if we don't attach this to class size and composition, it could easily trickle away like water through sand. There are so many needs in a district this size that it could be like pouring a cup of water in the sand. You see a tiny bit of dampness, and it's gone. We need to attach it to class size and composition so that we know that even though it isn't enough money, at least some is going to go to support our students.
Thank you, Trustee Allen.
Can I just make a quick comment that they don't need to go away if trustees agree to have it trickle away. In fact, I'll be decided to do that for the contract. It's just that we don't usually predetermine what's going to happen at this point because it's not. We invite the public to listen to their presentations, and then we give considered debate and we make a decision. So I'm just saying that it's unusual that to predetermine how much is going to be spent at this point in production process. And as I say, if the trustees want to go to class-size composition, that's how to do it.
Would it help to change the wording to, never mind, I'm not going there. It's getting late, and Trustee Ferris.
I'd just like to, I agree with Trustee Horton on this. I'd like to table this to see if there's an actual budget meeting. We can make that decision at that time. I think we need to continue to hear from people about what their concerns are. And I think there's a will around this board to address class issues. And, we've heard it, the chair said that
So move to table if there's no discussion, so call the question on whether you want to table this to the budget meeting on April the 16th. All those in favor of tabling? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 in favor of tabling. And opposed would be Alpha. Actually, it's 6 because did I put my hand up? Okay, let's put our hands up again. I'll count. We're moving. It's to tabling to the April 16th. Tabling to the April 16th. I mean, you know, we've already put it out there. Never mind. I can't speak to it.
Just record the natives. There's Trustee McAvoy, Trustee McNally, and Trustee Alpha are in the negative. All the rest of the classes. Okay.
No abstentions.
No abstentions.
McAvoy, Alpha, and I'm sorry. Down. Okay. So moving on from that work, we've completed that section of that portion of the agenda. Trustee Ferris.
I have yet another tabling motion to bring forward. I think that listening to the verbal conversation over the last 10 minutes, that we've pretty well come to the end of our end of the line here. I'd like to see us, you know, if there's any absolutely necessary business, defer to the superintendent. Otherwise, I think we should table these.
I'm the last one to try to keep people longer, but there is one motion that's time sensitive.
Yes.
you
And
got F2?
and that is the playground.
Well, I would say F1 and F2.
We don't vote tonight. The decision will be made before we get a chance to vote.
Do we have agreement to deal with F1? And if we have time by 11, I'd really like to deal with F2 if possible, but definitely F1. So, Trustee Norm, this is yours.
Thank you very much.
Although it's now ours.
So we received information from the Secretary Treasurer about all the playgrounds in 2009, 2010, 2011. And I have spoken with a variety of parents who came to me and said, would you consider bringing a motion forward on our behalf because of the cost involved in the installation. So for that reason of equity, I'm putting this sort of motion forward that we make this request.
Trustee Leonard? Okay, and then Deb?
I just want a friendly amendment that the chair writes the Minister of Education instead of staff.
Okay. And you're in agreement to that, Deborah? Yeah. Trustee Horseman?
I would be in favor of the motion. I know how hard it is for parents to raise funds for playground equipment. Particularly, I think the education is funding all of the playground equipment. But I definitely think the motion is fair. Would the amendment of the board chair be?
Yeah. That's right. Oh, Trustee Ferris and Trustee Warren coming back.
I just, through you, Chair, to perhaps the Secretary Treasurer, I'd like to know whether, to what pile of money are we directing this?
They never, through you, Madam Chair, they never told us where they came up with the pot of dollars that they did come up with for this allocation. So if the minister came up with more money for playgrounds and their budget hasn't been increased, it has to come from someplace.
I guess my concern here is, am I asking the minister to give up money for classrooms to pay for a playground? That's my own question. Because if that's the case, then I'm not supporting the motion. I'd like to be very clear.
Anyone else for vote?
I mean, I don't know. But you know, we get asked for money. How do you know we're going to
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
I'm just making notes for these letters I have to write and ensure it's not a education dollars. Education dollars now or later. Okay, seeing no further questions or no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Hey. Yes, unanimous. That's great. So, yeah, I think we do have time to do the next one, which I think is very timely, and this has to do with Trustee McNally's motion. So, yes. Yes, okay. Thanks. Trustee McNally?
Reached the point in the evening when my eloquence is going to be tried on this, so I'm going to be pretty simple. I think it's pretty much straightforward statement that, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I hope that the rest of my trustee colleagues on the board will agree with me that when we're dealing with our employee groups, and thinking about how to develop a working relationship with them. And I know I'm not the person doing the bargaining, but I'm committed to collective bargaining as a big element of social justice. I really do think that workers need collective agreements in order to have a say in their own employment. So I'm not going to go any further because I think my explanations will just get less eloquent as I go on. I don't really support this motion.
I would just clarify that again would be the chair that would read that letter. I'm adding it to my list, and I have Trustee McAvoy and Trustee Lauren Bermuda.
Well, I'll just repeat what I said publicly, and that is that the best agreement is a freely negotiated one at the bargaining table. All of us are trustees, teachers, the community hope for in all this exercise, so let's hope that comes to pass.
Trustee Lauren Bermuda, and then Tara would like to make a comment.
Yes, and I was just going to say that I would vote in favor as well, because I don't believe in legislating everybody back to work, and I believe that we need to make sure that it's a negotiated settlement.
Thank you. Tara, then Elaine.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear the comments around the table, and I'm sure that if this motion passes, teachers will be very pleased to have the support from this board on this issue. I would suggest you write the letter quickly. The quote-unquote fact finder is releasing their report on Thursday. In 2005, it was 8 days from the release of the fact finder report to Royal Assent of Bill 12. The other piece of information I just wanted to share is that the BCTF did call today for the appointment of a mediator, and so if you were interested in supporting that, that would be something to consider. So, thank you.
Thanks, Tara. And I have Trustee Leonard next.
I was just going to say that I think around this table, everybody would have been in favor of this motion all along. A stranger motion would have been that we were in favor of a imposed settlement from the school, from the government. So I think all along we've always wanted this. So just
it's reaffirmation.
It's reaffirmation, but I know that's what we all wanted all along.
Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Yeah, Catherine's, so it's, yeah. It's unanimous, yes, I would. Yes, thank you. So we've actually done pretty well tonight. Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Marvin.
So, just following up from this motion, I would like to put a motion on the floor that we also send a letter to the Minister of Education, asking for the government to appoint a mediator, because I really believe that follows along with our other motion.
See, it is getting late, and I know you're tired anyway. Motion to adjourn, and the rest, there's only, oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Horsman.